Teachers, what's the best smartass response from a student you've heard? I'm a 12th grade English teacher, and one year I had this kid who was a little bit on the spectrum and a stereotypical mean girl in the same class. Ava, the mean girl, would always try to have everyone's attention on her in class, always making comments such as, "Ugh, this class is way too easy," and "Can we just watch a movie in class today, please?" She would also make fun of Conrad, the kid on the spectrum, to get laughs from the other boys in the class. She would specifically make fun of Conrad's hair, as he had this massive afro. One day at the end of the school year, I decided for the class we'd look through the yearbook because we didn't have any more assignments for the rest of the year. I had it presented on the smartboard, and as we're looking through it, we got to the senior superlative section of the yearbook. As we're going through them, we got to the award for the craziest hair, and the winner was Conrad. He sat right in the front of the class and was getting all excited for winning. Then Ava, who sat right behind him, threw an eraser onto his hair, and it landed right on top of his afro without Conrad noticing. The whole class started snickering, and I could tell Ava was proud of herself. I told her to please remove it, and she begrudgingly said, fine. I flipped to the next award, and it was Ava, as most school-spirited. Our school mascot is the Eagles, so as soon as I flipped to the page, Conrad said, "Yeah, because our legs are always spread eagle."
Have you ever made somebody cry of embarrassment? So I'm pulling a long day, up at 3:30 a.m. to get to the airport. Pull a full day working in a different country, and head back to the airport at 6 p.m., just to get back to my bed late at night, a long day, and there's nothing to eat the whole day but road food. Even the freaking business lunch that I've been looking forward to is in a low-rent cafeteria due to refurbishments at the client's site. I hold it together through the day, the occasional grumble silenced by fastidious willpower and an air of professional courtesy. But things are going badly for my guts by the time I'm waving goodbye and getting into the airport taxi. Now I'm used to taxis where you sit in the back separated by a screen, but this is more of a private hire situation, and I'm up at the front with the driver. I'm actually irritated that I'm still holding back this storm of gas that's been building through meeting after meeting with no opportunity for release, but for propriety's sake I don't let rip next to the poor cabbie. Turns out manners are a one-way street. We've been driving about 5 minutes, and this terrible smell hits my nose. The cabbie has ripped one, I can't believe it. My eyes are watering, and he just carries on talking about the weather like it hasn't even happened. I figure he's probably embarrassed so I don't say anything. But a couple of minutes later, another one. Bam! It's disgusting. I have to close my mouth because the air's thick enough you can basically taste it. But then I'm just breathing through my nose, which is helping nobody. It actually feels like it's burning me. My throat is closing up. Above all, it seems so deeply unfair. I'm here maintaining some class, holding back a fart that could jumpstart a second universe, but I'm still breathing the same shit gas as if I wasn't, courtesy of my filthy cabbie. I think, F it, if this guy goes in for round 3 I am releasing my demons and letting him take the blame. We're 5 minutes out, and he parks another air biscuit. F you, I think, and I do the deed. It's perfectly executed. A silent release of a full day of pressure. Every fart has been banked since 9 a.m. and I'm cashing them all in with interest. It's a silent rush of hot air, compressed into 10 seconds of pure release. I'm almost surprised you don't hear my rusty knothole slam shut when it finally ends. Mission accomplished. The perfect undercover fart. I know what you're thinking. How did this go wrong? Didn't gamble and lose? Didn't let out a loud, incriminating trumpet? Didn't puke, or pee, knock his coffee into his lap or set off the passenger airbags? Nope. It all went according to plan. For a moment, I was proud of myself. Then the smell hits. I have outdone myself. It's a devastating repose to what has come before. It hits all the usual notes and adds a hint of burning rubber for effect. It's a spectacular crescendo of wrongful aromas. I can recognize every awful thing I've eaten all day in the mix. It's a fart so carefully matured it could have come with tasting notes, and they would have been one word in length. Don't. Now let me tell you how this was an F-up. The electric window slowly slides down next to me, and the cold air hits my face. The cabbie turns to me, with actual tears in his eyes, and says, "I am so sorry." "Ah, what for?" I ask innocently. "That fart," he replies, eyes wide open, as if it should be obvious. "I mean, geez, everybody farts, we're only human. But that, I'm just so sorry." He leaves the windows down all the way into the airport, and gives me a discount on the fare. All the red I way home, all I can think is I stink so bad, I've made a cabbie of polygons.
To the boy who lost his father while at summer camp. I think about you often. I think you were 9 or 10, which means you're probably in high school now. I was one of the counselors in charge of our little pack of Wolverines. I think often of the day you didn't show up for camp, and my supervisor pulled me and my co-counselor aside to tell us what happened. Until then I hadn't had any idea that your father was in the hospital losing his battle to cancer, or how your mom was trying to distract you with another summer of camp. I don't think you'd realized he was losing his battle until then, either. I think often of all the times that you broke down, or blew up, and how I'd find a way to get you some privacy while you worked through it. I told you it was okay to be sad, angry, and to cry. That if I was experiencing what you were I would do the same. That it was normal. I never told you how hard it was to not cry with you. I remember when I was a kid how scary it was to realize that my parents weren't infallible immortals. I knew you didn't need more reminders that adults could be weak, but oh kiddo, how my heart broke with you. I don't know if it was wrong of me, but I tried to make sure I was the one to be with you for those moments. I didn't trust the other staff members to not tell you to stop crying, or to be strong, or to not be sad. I didn't trust them not to tell you everything was okay. Losing your dad at that age is one of the furthest things from okay that I can think of. Even big boys get sad and cry, and you had every right and reason. Your mom got you therapy and a puppy. I could tell how much she loved you and how hard she was trying to take care of you and herself through it all. Zach, if you ever read this, I hope you're doing well. My husband called me by his dead wife's name twice. Please help. I met my husband 4 years ago through the same work industry and we both instantly felt the same attraction. On our first date he told me he was widowed, that his wife had died unexpectedly at the age of 31, 2 years prior. 3 years later, we got married at the beginning of this year. Everything has been good until 2 months after we got married. I've noticed that his behavior was changing. He started to get more quiet and kept to himself. He stopped telling me about his day or talking to me about his niche interests like he usually does. I asked him if he was feeling alright because this behavior was really unusual. He admitted that while cleaning, he came across some of his previous wife's belongings and that he accidentally tossed something from their wedding night. I felt sad for him and I couldn't imagine how he felt as this is my first marriage. I tried my best to cheer him up but his happiness was short. One night, we got into a small disagreement about some movie we were watching. During the argument, he called me by her name, which is something that he had never done. He looked frightened and shocked that he said this. He kept apologizing after it and I told him it was alright. He cried and I held him. The next morning, I noticed he didn't sleep at all. I asked him if he wanted to talk about what happened the previous night. He got mad and told me he was gonna go visit his brother. I felt worried and told him I love him just for reassurance. It did hurt that he called me by her name, but part of me wanted to understand where he was coming from. I know he really loved this woman and sometimes I don't think I can amount to her. It seems like he holds her to a pedestal and I'm just there. I have hoped he doesn't actually feel that way, but with the recent events, I'm starting to think about it more and more. He came home around midnight and he apologized for what happened and how he reacted. I told him everything was fine and didn't express my concerns because I didn't want it to turn into another huge argument. A few weeks ago, we were having intimacy and while he was finishing, he called me by her name again. This time I was mortified, jumped off the bed, and moved away from him. He tried to comfort me by giving me a hug and he kept apologizing. I told him I was going to stay in our guest room and I did not feel up to a confrontation right now. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, he kept apologizing and told him it's fine. We talked for a bit. I asked him if he was alright and if he needed to speak to someone professionally. He agreed to go speak to someone, but he didn't show up to the appointment that we had set up for him. Our conversation since then has been insanely short. Everything has been weird since he called me her name during intimacy. He rarely speaks to me, only when he needs something. Which makes me sad because I do love him, but I'm scared that he doesn't love me. Worst of all, I recently found out that I'm pregnant. I'm happy because I've always wanted to be a mother, but I am sad I don't know if the father of my child even loves me anymore.
What hurts at first, but feels good after a few seconds. Taking off tight shoes after walking the entire day. One of those stinging itches that when you scratch it, it hurts so good. Lying on the floor after a long day of standing up. Complete agony at first. When you really need a pee and can finally unload. When your leg falls asleep and it wakes up, the shit is pure agony for like 2 minutes, but it feels so good when you finally have feeling in your leg again. Spicy food. It hurts so good, then it's just a nice feeling in your mouth after. Sticking your frostbitten toes under warm water.
What's the most tragic thing you've ever seen? 2 police officers in uniform walked into the store just as we were getting ready to close for the night. One of the men walked up and set a plastic bag and a roll of film on the counter in front of me. Inside the plastic bag was a small black camera. The camera was smashed up pretty bad. There is a roll of film in this camera that we need to get out and develop if possible. Is this something you can help with? I was about 19 years old at the time, working in a photography store at a mall in rural Southwest Virginia, right on the edge of the Appalachian Mountains. We have a film lab at the police station but our equipment is broken at the moment. We need to get this film developed as soon as possible. And, we don't know how to get this out of the camera without ruining the film. Since the camera was broken, the film was stuck in the camera in the middle of the roll. If the camera was working, the film could be wound back into the roll and protected from the light when the back cover of the camera was opened. If they opened the camera to take out the film as it was, any pictures that were taken would immediately be ruined once the undeveloped film was exposed to the light. We did have a small black box to use for this exact type of situation. The box was sealed so no light would get inside. I could put the broken camera inside the sealed box, reach my hands through an opening on each side of the box, slip my hands into black gloves that were attached inside, and open the camera to remove the film without any light damaging it before it was developed. I told him I could help. No problem at all. Did you hear about the plane crash this afternoon? We recovered the camera from the crash site. We don't know what is on the roll of film, but it might help us find out what went wrong. Are you okay with developing those pictures for us? I am sure there are people who would say no to that question. I was not one of those people. Of course I would help. And I was curious to see what was on the roll of film. Can you develop this other roll of film as well? These are the pictures we took at the crash site. They are quite gruesome though. The pictures of the crash, before the bodies were taken to the morgue. And there are a few pictures from the morgue as well. It really is okay if you would prefer not to develop these, but we figure it doesn't hurt to ask. I had been working all day so I hadn't seen the news. A small private plane crashed just a few miles from the store where I was working. It wasn't that uncommon for plane crashes like this to happen. The Appalachian Mountains were not easy for small planes to fly in and out of. Since the photo equipment at the police station wasn't working, if we were not able to help them, they would have to drive over an hour away to the next closest photography store. Or wait however many weeks it would take for them to get their equipment fixed. I told him I would help. No problem at all. My coworker offered to help as well. She took the camera out of the plastic bag to start working on removing the roll of film while I grabbed the second roll to start developing the photos from the crash site. The pictures came through one at a time, each one more horrific than the last. The plane crashed in the middle of the woods, barreling through layers of trees before it hit the ground. Plane parts were everywhere. There was hardly anything left of the plane itself. There were pictures of each of the bodies of the 4 men who were on the plane. Their bodies were large, covered in blood. I could see their limbs disconnected and lying on the ground, far from where the bodies were. The men's bodies were torn to pieces, just like the plane was. It was surreal. I packaged up the stack of pictures in an envelope with a huge lump in my throat. All of a sudden I wanted to unsee everything I just saw. But it was too late. As I handed the envelope to the police officer, my coworker handed me the second roll that she was able to remove from the broken camera. As I developed the film from the camera, I saw there were only 4 pictures taken on that roll of film. The first 2 were pictures of the 4 men standing next to their plane. Fishing gear in hand, huge joyful smiles on their faces, arms wrapped around each other for a group photo before taking off for a weekend fishing trip. All 4 of them looked like they were in their mid to late 50s. The third was a photo taken on the plane by one of the men sitting in the front seat of the 2 men who were sitting in the back seat. The last photo was of the plane's control panel. When the plane started to go down, before it crashed, one of the men took a picture of the control panel. He must have taken the photo knowing there may be a chance that the camera would survive the crash, and there would be a small glimpse of what went wrong. A small piece of evidence to help explain to their loved ones what happened, and to hopefully prevent this from happening again. In their last moments they were courageous. I thought about those men for months. I wondered how long they knew each other. How many fishing trips had they been on together? What did they say to each other when they knew the plane was going down? Were they at peace with their lives before everything ended so abruptly? This was over 15 years ago and I still see each of those pictures so vividly in my mind as I type this.
My boyfriend loves his dead wife more than me. My boyfriend and I have been in a relationship for over 3 years. He was married before and is widowed, while my ex-husband cheated on me with his friend. While snuggling on the couch, we watched a movie where the female protagonist's first husband was presumed dead, and she had a new life with her current husband. When her first husband returns, she chooses her current life. This shifted the tone of our date. The next day during dinner, he brought up a conversation I thought we shouldn't have about who we would choose if a late spouse returned. I feel it's not my place to comment on this. During our early dating phase, I read books on dating a widower and focused on my own relationship needs. This included assessing if he prioritized me, handling her photos and stories, burial arrangements, and celebrations. Before anyone comments, it's essential to share our history. Since my divorce, I've been cautious about dating widowers, not wanting to sign up to feel like a substitute or second choice. Deal breakers became more crucial after my ex cheated on me. Initially, I didn't want to date my current boyfriend, but he insisted I be more open-minded, and now we have a great life together. I made him aware of my discomfort with his late wife's past and shenanigans before we got serious, giving him the choice not to date me if he wasn't ready to leave his past relationship in the past and focus on his future with me. He gave the vibe that I felt like I won somehow based on how the protagonist chose for herself. I never initiated that discussion. He asked me, "Do you think what the girl chose was morally right?" I never wanted to comment on it because it can get emotionally messy, but he pushed and cornered me until I gave him a response. Since he had the cheek to test me and put me in such a difficult position, I told him what I thought. Even if you won't concede to the fact that you will choose the present and future with me over your late wife should she come back, the truth is, based on how much time you've spent with me and gotten to know me, you are more compatible with me now. Your late wife didn't support you through your career phase like I did, she didn't introduce you to things and activities that I did. You had a whole life with her, but now you have a whole life with me, and you should know what you prefer. Your late wife's memory is always going to hold some sentimental value, but it's me who you actively love now and choose. I've always been very vocal about my attitudes and beliefs, and I think this rubbed him the wrong way. He knew all about this when he first agreed to date me seriously, and now he's been pouting and acting weird. If he was gonna call into question something that makes every person dating a widowed person uncomfortable, I sure as hell would assert my own worth. My statement to him was in no way a comparison to her. She was her own person, and they had a whole life together. But now, he has a whole life with me. He had something with her he doesn't have with me, true. But it's also true that he has something beautiful with me that he couldn't have with her. I try to be mature about my take and focus on how I can make more memories and beautiful experiences with him, without his late wife as a reference point for the kind of relationships he experiences in his life. In a way, My relationship with him is unique in its own right, and I was happy and content with that, until he got to confront this physical and material reality himself through my words. I don't know what to do with these childish things he's been doing. He is acting very cold and distant, looking at her pictures at night while having intimacy with me. Is he really so petty that he regrets thinking he might choose me after all? I'm honestly thinking of breaking up with him over this.
My girlfriend cheated and then asked to date us both. I took our entire apartment with me on my way out. I am a woman and my ex is a woman. We are both queer women. It was my first serious relationship and we had a dog, cat, and apartment together. I was extremely dedicated to her and I paid most of the bills and did all of the life management stuff. Tip: look for an equal. I paid for basically every furnishing in the home despite her making more. My ex was horrible with money. My ex had met some girl online and I caught her cheating. She gaslit me until I snooped and found the proof. She then had the gall to ask me if she could date us both while she figured out what she wanted. I was done. I booked movers. Moving day came. They packed everything except her bed, desk, clothes, and two $5 IKEA coffee tables. And goodbye every single piece of kitchenware. Here's where I got really petty. I left the paper plates and plastic cutlery but took everything else. When I left the apartment, it had no sofa, no dining table, no chairs, no wall decor, no bathroom towels, no shower curtain, no bathroom materials except one roll of toilet paper. I didn't even leave the soap in the kitchen, because I'd bought that. And I didn't even want the shower curtain, it was a dollar store find, but I wasn't about to let her keep it. The look on her face when she realized I was leaving was stunned, because she didn't realize what that would mean for her. Then she told all of her friends that I was a bitch for taking all of our stuff, that only I paid for. She had the gall to expect to cheat on me and expect to be allowed to keep things I had bought. She then, as I was moving out, asked me to stay, but when I refused, she lined up a new roommate with an aggressive dog who basically destroyed the apartment. She was evicted 3 months later for non-payment of rent and spent months living at a campsite. I was even nice and had left her a letter detailing the bills and when they were due. It was not enough. She's tried to be friends a few times since, seemingly forgetting how we ended things. I hear she's cheated on all her new partners repeatedly since we were together. Good riddance, Kara. I took the dog, I paid for the dog, the cat was hers pre-relationship, too.
High school teachers of Reddit, what's the most awkward position a student has ever put you in? One of my very good-looking male friends is a science maths teacher. He's one of those mad people that loves to make maths fun, and honestly his classes are like a damn performance. It's beautiful, but a lot of the girls in the class just giggle and ask him if he has a girlfriend. He kept deflecting them and concentrated on making the class fun, but then they got nasty to a quiet girl he paid too much attention to. She was actually interested in math and he gave her some extra material after class that he thought she'd like. He fully put his foot down and demanded a parent meeting with all of the girls and questioned parents and told them straight up they could either act like mature people or get out, and that he didn't deserve to be borderline harassed while working. Most of the parents were just mortified their daughters would behave like that, but a few were like it's a compliment, etc. Luckily admin were on his side. Ran into one of my students at the store. The only things in my cart were duct tape, tampons, and motor oil. He looked at my items, and his eyes got large. Not sure what he was imagining I was going to do, but we both acted like it never happened the next day in school.
My unhinged future sister-in-law shaved my beard while I'm sleeping because it feels weird when I go down on her sister. So I called off the wedding. My fiancée Lexi and I have been a happy couple of 6 years and engaged for 1 or so, I thought. My fiancée's sister, we'll call her Sally, has always been hostile towards me and would rarely speak to me, and when she did it would be because her parents were around. Sally is Lexi's rock because she got her through a tough time during college, and since then Lexi has told Sally everything about everything. We've had problems with this in the past due to her telling Sally personal things about my childhood that I'd only told a few people. Then 3 nights ago she mentioned that she'd like me to shave my beard. For context, I have a very thick beard that I've been growing for 8 years and I'm very proud of. So I of course told Lexi I wouldn't be shaving my beard, to which she stormed off to the kitchen and slammed her wine glass into the sink, smashing it and a plate in the process. I immediately stood up and asked what the F she was doing. She then spun around and screamed that I'm a selfish a-hole because I won't shave my beard, and ran to our bedroom and slammed the door. I ended up sleeping on the couch and woke up at around 4 a.m. to Sally with a razor trying to shave my beard, so I pushed her off me. Lexi then ran to check on Sally whilst I was looking at the big patch Sally had taken out of my beard. Then I went upstairs and packed a bag whilst Lexi shouted at me for hurting Sally. I told her to F off and that the wedding was off, walked out of the house and drove an hour to my parents' house where I've been staying since the incident. Earlier today I got a text from Sally saying I was selfish for not shaving my beard because when I go down on Lexi it feels weird. My family thinks I should break off the relationship, but her family said I should just shave it all and move on. Update: I've now got as of typing 99 plus texts and calls from Lexi saying things like don't leave, let's have intimacy one more time, and I'm pregnant, she's trying to baby trap me I think. Lexi messaged me weird things. Like miss me and I'll take the baby too. Sally then messaged me saying Lexi was in the hospital being treated after a suicide attempt. I don't believe it at all. I've blocked Sally's number now. I called the police and showed evidence of her suicidal messages, so she hopefully will be getting checked into an institution. Lexi's aunt, who is the only person on her side that agrees with me, just called me to tell me Lexi has been checked into a psychiatric unit for 2 weeks. I've filed a police report on Sally for assault, and I'm in the process of canceling the wedding venue. I'm back at the house. I've had a locksmith change the locks just in case. The wedding venue can't be refunded, but it was going to be paid for by her parents anyway, so I don't care. I've also contacted my lawyers.
I found something perverted in my boyfriend's closet and now he's mad at me. I don't even know why I'm considering looking past this. It's the most embarrassing and pathetic conflict I've ever found myself in with a partner. I've been seeing my current boyfriend for about 5 months now. We met at a local coffee shop when he approached me and called me stunningly beautiful. He seemed like a bit of an awkward guy, but he was adorable to me, so I decided to give him a chance. He really surprised me with how charismatic and funny he turned out to be. He really looks like a typical nerdy guy, but he's got a rich personality. He's the most sensitive, unique guy I've ever dated, and lately, I realized that I have started to fall in love with him. I had never been in love before this relationship. But I feel like my feelings have been crushed before they even had a chance to grow. All this bullshit happened the other night when my boyfriend was working late. I was alone in his apartment waiting for him to get off of work. It was about 1 a.m. at this point. My boyfriend always worked long hours, and I was used to staying up this late for him. I had a job interview the next day, and I was looking around his apartment for an iron for my dress shirt. He has a larger apartment, so even though I've been there regularly for a couple of months now, I hadn't seen every inch of it. That's how I ended up opening a random closet while searching for an iron, and catching a glimpse of a body inside his closet. When I saw the silhouette, the hair on my neck stood up, and I thought for a split second that my partner might be a full-on murderer. I cautiously flicked on the closet's lights, and the next thing I knew I was making eye contact with a rubber intimacy doll. It wasn't like one of those cheap blow-up ones either. It looked like it had real skin and breasts and everything, like something out of a sci-fi movie. It was the creepiest effing thing I had ever seen in my life, and all I knew was that I was disgusted with my boyfriend and I wanted answers. I dragged her out of the closet, and plopped her on the couch in the living room. I sat right there next to her, and sat with my arms crossed, facing the door until I heard the sound of my boyfriend's keys. I looked him straight in the eye as he walked in, and his jaw hit the floor the moment he saw me with his special lady. I gestured to the intimacy doll and asked about his friend. To my astonishment, the first thing that came out of my boyfriend's mouth was, "Why did you touch her? She's expensive." My boyfriend ignored me, and instead grabbed his doll and started putting her back into the closet. It was the grossest, strangest image, watching him gently scoop up the doll and place her tenderly back in the closet. All the love that I had been developing for him at that moment completely vanished, and I was sickened that he owned that thing, and that he obviously still cared about it. When he walked back into the living room, he went on a long rant about how he trusted me alone in my apartment, and he didn't want me snooping around anymore. I was totally taken aback. I thought he would be embarrassed after I found the doll, but he seemed more upset at me than anything. I left his apartment that night, and I haven't seen him since. He never reached out to me either. Guess he's too busy with his side piece.
My girlfriend is a crybaby, but that's okay because it's funny. So yesterday me and my girlfriend were planning on going to Chili's for dinner. I wake her up from a 3-hour nap at 8 p.m. for us to go. She continues to stall as I constantly remind her, "Come on, we gotta get ready. We're both hungry, so let's go," but she keeps sitting in her bed trying to just cuddle and talk, which I never have a problem with. I was just hungry and wanted to get there before they closed. So in the end we finally got there at 10:30 p.m. Doors locked. Google Maps said they closed at 11 p.m. but I said they probably closed the doors an hour early so nobody goes in at the last minute. But there was a TGI Fridays right next door that didn't close till midnight, so I suggested we go there instead. She starts crying. I hug her and tell her it's okay. It's just Chili's. Worst comes to worst, we'll just get fast food tonight and eat Chili's tomorrow. Her response is she continues crying, "But I want Chili's now." To which I, completely unexpectedly and out of my control, audibly laughed. She got mad at me for laughing, but I calmed her down and we just got Wendy's instead. Now fast forward to this morning. This is her first day with this new position at work that requires her to wake up at 6 a.m., as opposed to 8 a.m. when she used to wake up. We both wake up and I go to start prepping her lunch bag as she would get dressed. But this time I notice she's just standing there and not getting ready. "You okay? Come on, you gotta get dressed. I don't want you to be late," I say. And she immediately starts crying. I ask why and she responds, "I'm tired." Once again I can't control the laughter as I am faced with somebody being this sad that they are sleepy. I don't think she's on her period because she had it 2 weeks ago. Maybe it came back early, but she hasn't mentioned any cramps or anything. And now she won't talk to me. I told her we'll talk it out when we're both off of work. Is she overreacting to mild problems?
My gay brother unalived himself because of our transphobic parents. My parents cut ties with my brother 3 years ago when they discovered that he was in a relationship with another guy. He was a great brother and a son to our parents. He has always been at the top of his class. My brother also has a lot of friends and was pretty popular for being so kind. He is very well respected in the neighborhood because he helps anyone he thinks that needs it. Until one day, my father saw my brother having a date with his boyfriend. He confronted my brother and he admitted that he was gay. My father did not take it very well and told my brother that he doesn't have a gay child. He and my brother had never gotten along since then, but he had always had a very good relationship with our mother and myself. Until my dad decided to cut ties with him, my mother and I did the same thing. The reason why my dad is very against his sexuality is because we are Catholics. I was 14 and he was 17. He then had problems with trauma and depression because of the vile things my dad has said to him. He took refuge with our uncle who accepted him. What we don't know is that that would be the last time we will see him. He unalived himself a few months ago. He was just 20 years old. I am full of guilt. I abandoned him. I was a horrible sister. Because of what happened, my mother doesn't speak to anyone anymore and is also in enormous guilt. My uncle doesn't want to talk to me anymore. And even though my father doesn't show it, he is also very affected as I can still hear him sob in their room sometimes. Also, his boyfriend was at his funeral and said horrible things to my mother while glaring at me. I hate myself and my parents. I just want to see him again, and I know it's selfish, but I didn't want to hurt him. I never hated him, he was always a kind brother to me. I can't stop thinking that he's in hell right now and I don't know how to cope.
My boyfriend is threatening to dox me because he doesn't think I should be anonymous online. I have a music YouTube channel with 300k subscribers. It's an insane amount of viewers to me, and it's allowed me to live my dream of making music for a living. I am also anonymous. I don't want to sound preachy, but I've sort of allowed my fans to dream iffy me in that since they have no idea what I look like. The canon/theory is this super attractive goth gamer girl with a perfect body. I am not that. I obviously won't go into specifics, but I have incredibly low self-esteem and look nothing like what people think. And with the whole dream unmasking/remask fiasco, I've made an even more conscious effort to stay anonymous. I do regret this decision in hindsight, but I made the account when I was 14 and it started gaining traction when I was 16, and I wasn't comfortable with talking down to any new viewers. It's dumb logic, but it was true to me at the time. My boyfriend, however, thinks that's bull and that I should show my face because it'll make my life easier. I highly disagree. Being anonymous means I can separate work and personal life. We got into a big argument last year after he told his sister who I was. Luckily, she's solid and promised not to tell anyone, and I believe her as we're friends, but it damaged my trust in him. I should have broken up with him then, but I was in a very bad place mentally already, and couldn't handle a breakup. Anyways, we got into an argument about it again, and I said that my anonymity online is not up for discussion, and if he brings it up again, I'm going to break up with him. Then, he threatened to leak pictures of my face and body, not intimate pictures, like pictures with my body in them, if I broke up with him. I don't know what to do. I really don't want my identity out there, but would it be worth it to get away from him? I'm sorry if this is dumb, my mind is scrambled.
My terrible sister-in-law made a fake dating profile using my name and sent it to my husband. She was bawling when I confronted her and she said it was just a joke. My sister-in-law and I are not close. Since I married my husband, we never talked decent because she would always avoid or ignore me. I always catch her rolling her eyes whenever I come to my in-laws' house since they live there as well. I thought it was just because she was pregnant at that time, but when her first child came out, nothing changed. One thing that I hate about her attitude is that whenever I bring food for my in-law, she'll always have something mean to say like, "This dish is so bland, I can do better than this," or "It's a good thing that your husband is in the military, there's better food out there." Whenever my in-laws are not around, she'll say, "I don't know what your husband saw in you. I can't see anything special." Then smile like she never said anything offensive. My in-laws can also notice her indifferent attitude towards me, and they will just tell me that that's the way she is and that I should try to understand. Yesterday was my niece's first birthday, and originally the plan for the cake was for my father-in-law to buy a store-bought cake. When he mentioned he was buying a $50 store-bought cake for the party, I asked if I could bake the birthday cake instead. My father-in-law was thrilled at the idea and requested that it be a surprise to my sister-in-law and brother-in-law. I saw no issue and agreed. I thought this could even be the reason she would warm up to me. Over the past week, I have spent countless hours on this cake, and although I did not meet those high expectations, I 100% believe it is better than a store-bought cake. I put a lot of effort into it because the party's theme is cowboys in Texas, and it cost me $200 to make it. Yesterday at the party, when it was time to bring out the cake, my father-in-law took the cake out of its hiding spot and brought it into the main area of the party. When my brother-in-law saw the cake, he had a big smile and seemed really happy. However, when my sister-in-law saw the cake, she looked mortified. Sister-in-law threw on a fake smile and asked my father-in-law about the cake, and probably my father-in-law announced that I was the one who made the cake. My sister-in-law gritted her teeth the entire time we sang happy birthday and refused to even try the cake for the whole party. After I left, I was bombarded with messages from my sister-in-law. The messages were everything from how I intentionally sabotaged her daughter's first birthday party. Because of me, all the photos of her daughter's first birthday are ruined by the stain of my trashy cake. I didn't know what to say, so I just screenshot all of the texts and sent them to my husband, who is currently overseas for the military. After I did that, everything blew up. My husband texted my brother-in-law how his wife is being ungrateful and unreasonable. My in-laws are just trying to play both sides. Every Saturday we usually do a family day, but this morning my father-in-law asked me to sit out of this week's family day, and I'm crushed. Honestly, I was just trying to be nice and make my niece's birthday even more memorable. I was not trying to take the day away from her, but it feels like everyone's against me. After a few weeks, I thought of going to my in-laws' house to talk to them because I felt like this wasn't fair on my part. Everyone is shunning me. Right before I was about to leave, I got a phone call from my husband, and he was extremely upset. He told me he needed to make me aware of his situation. Apparently, sister-in-law sent him a dating profile with my name and pictures. Before I could say anything, my husband reassured me he knew it was fake. A few things that tipped him off are screenshots from the profile said less than a mile away when referring to the distance of the user, and it was my sister-in-law who found the account. My straight, female, And married sister-in-law just randomly decided to go on Bumble and somehow fell upon my profile even though we live over 100 miles apart. Of course, this made me mad. I don't know why she is trying to slander me. When I got to my in-laws' house, father-in-law rushed out to talk to me. He told me I had every right to be upset but asked me to be the bigger person and not cause any more unnecessary drama. I think my husband already told them. But I don't care at this point, this is not about the cake anymore. She is trying to destroy my marriage. When I got to sister-in-law, initially she denied everything but after about 2 minutes she couldn't keep her story straight. Instead of apologizing she just started bawling her eyes out. She blamed the whole thing on pregnancy hormones and tried to play it off as a joke. My in-laws both pulled me outside to try and get me to calm down. I asked them why they were taking her side. They told me there were no sides and they were just trying to keep the peace. After they said that I lost it and told them keeping the peace it's just an excuse used by enablers. I told them that they had a very important decision to make. If they chose to stand sister-in-law they would lose me as a consequence. They told me they were afraid to lose their grandchild and I responded with, "You're going to lose a set of grandchildren. Either way, it's either going to be the ones in front of you now or the future grandchildren I and husband will have." Then I went home. My brother-in-law thinks me and my husband are severely overreacting and he is actually upset at me for raising my voice at his pregnant wife. He sent a very long angry text message to my husband. To quote part of his text directly, it was just a effing joke. "Your wife had no effing right to talk to my wife like that. She should count herself effing lucky I wasn't there." My husband replied, "What if you're there? You would put your hands on her though you know that this is all because of your ignorant wife? Try and do that and I will hunt you down." His brother then changed his tone and said that this is all a misunderstanding. That I should forgive his wife because everything is a joke. My husband replied, "What part of it is a joke? Do you think that tearing our marriage apart is a joke?" My husband and I are on the same page and we have both agreed to cut contact with his family unless some kind of just consequence for sister-in-law happens.
Teachers, did you ever have a student you seriously hated? I've been teaching for 12 years. It's tough to hate a kid. I've had some rough ones. I had a 4-year-old that would try to take out the other kid's eyes. No joke, he would try to get his thumbs in the eye sockets of the kids. But he was adopted and his birth mother kept him strapped into a car seat for the first 2 years of his life and never let him out. He didn't last long in the school. I didn't hate him, just felt horrible for him. I've had students who disrupt the class all the time. They are just crying out for attention and if you talk to them enough, you can generally get through to them. Not always. I have seen some kids I taught when they were 8 and now 18, and still generally in bad shape. They just grow up to be bad parents. Spoiling kids does that. It makes them lazy and self-absorbed. These kids are also generally raised by a nanny, not their parents though. These are the kids I hate. Hate is a very strong word though. I just wish I could get through to them and let them know that having large amounts of money and parents that bend to everything you want isn't going to help them be better human beings in life. Kids thrive on being given jobs that make them feel important. Ask a 4-year-old if they can hold open a door for you to help you out or just be polite. They generally feel like they are a superhero. My not even 2-year-old son beams when he helps us load the dishes in the dishwasher, or walks around the house trying to help sweep. Kids want to help and be adults. If you reward them with a good job, they will love you for it. You don't need to give them money or toys for doing chores, just show them that it really meant something to you. A lot of it has to do with their upbringing. The best ones are the kids who have parents who treat them with respect, don't give them every whim and talk to them like adults even when they are smaller. It's tough being a kid and being told what to do every day. Can you imagine getting ordered around all day? Of course most kids would act out. It's a tough line to walk, giving them the freedom to do what they would like to do and making sure they are following by guidelines and rules set in place. But make sure you are fully letting them know what exactly you are looking for and you stick to it. Honestly though, they are far and few between. Most kids are decent. It's just the bad ones that stick out in your mind because they are trying to stand out. I know I kind of rambled on. It's a bad habit. But I love teaching kids and helping people with ideas on how to help their kids out. But I feel the more kids I help, the more our world can have better leaders in the future. I think my golden child brother is getting freaky with my mom for brownie points. I know this will sound bizarre, and for me as too, but I have been having these suspicions for quite a long time. My brother, 22, and my mom, 40, have always had a close relationship. My brother is my mother's golden child. She's always taken him on trips without me, claiming that he needs her attention more than I did. Mind you, he's older than me and has no developmental issues. Anytime me and my brother get into a fight, she becomes weirdly defensive of him, even if he was in the wrong. She'll yell at me and tell me to stay in my place. It doesn't help that she gets him anything he wants because he's mommy's good boy. They're always giggling when I'm not around. At one point, it made me feel like an outsider in my own family. It gets weirder when my dad goes on a work trip. Every time, like clockwork, they become even closer. They start cuddling way too close to each other during a movie, holding hands in public, kissing on the cheek. My family is very anti-PDA, etc. Whenever I ask them about this, they say that is a normal mother and son relationship, but I feel quite disgusted with this. Yesterday was the final nail in the coffin. My dad went on a business trip on Thursday and should be back this Wednesday, so I was returning home after seeing some friends, and the house was quiet, but the lights were on. That bothered me, And when I went to take some comfy clothes from my room, I heard some noises from my parents' room. I just freaked out and remained quiet, then went to the bathroom. When I went out, my mom and brother were eating dinner like nothing happened. They even seemed surprised to see me home. For the rest of the day, she treated him like a prince and gave him anything he wanted. She even bought him that new PS5 game he wanted. I am confused right now. I don't know if I should tell my dad, because I have no solid proof, but I am almost 100% sure that something is going on. Are your children allowed to go in the refrigerator whenever they want? Note, we raised an only child, so it was just her, not siblings. I don't know if this would work with multiple kids. When my daughter was little, we kept pre-prepped stuff, like cut fruit and veggies, in a drawer in the fridge and single-serve snacks in a specific bin in the pantry that was hers for the taking, anytime. Even in the middle of the night or right before dinner, it always had something. As she got older, the rules changed. Starting around 3rd grade, she was able to prepare her own fruit, veggies, and sandwiches. Snack food, i.e. chips and sweets and juice boxes, was portioned out by the week and stocked on Thursdays when I did my grocery run. If she ate all of the chips and sweets in a few days, there wouldn't be any for Wednesday. Bummer. She learned to space them out. At this age, she was cooking with microwave and toaster whenever in the stove when a parent was awake and in the room. Around age 12, she was responsible for adding her stuff to the list, not family food but what she ate as snacks and wanted for lunch. At first we prompted her, but we gradually stopped doing that until if it wasn't on the list, we didn't buy it. If what she put on the list was outside of the norm or huge amounts or crazy out of budget, we talked about it. At this age, we requested that she use the stove/oven only if an adult was home. At 15, we gave her a budget for her stuff alone, shampoo for her bathroom, snacks for her that we didn't eat, soda, fancy water, etc., and she had to shop for herself with the provided money, first with us right next to her. Then with us shopping somewhere in the store for household stuff. Then with us in the car. And once she was driving, she drove herself. She also shopped for and prepared one family meal, dinner or weekend breakfast, per week. Quite a few of our friends/family members said some of these things were harsh, especially when we started a new thing that she had to manage herself and was struggling a bit in the beginning. They said we forced her to grow up too fast. We felt that it was our job to teach her to do for herself, not to do everything for her. How would she learn if we did it all? We also believed in natural consequences. If you eat all of the sweets over the weekend and you don't have any Wednesday, that might be sad but you're not harmed. There's still meal food, so you might be missing sweets but you're not starving. It helped her to learn to regulate herself. And it's a real world thing. Food is not unlimited. Anyway, we might be terrible parents, but when she moved into the dorms and later her own apartment, she already knew how to do those things. And that matters a lot. Girls of Reddit, what made you think no way I'm going on a second date with this guy during the first date? I had a male best friend in middle school. We stayed pretty close in junior high as well. In high school he would pretend not to know me and then call me as soon as we got home wanting me to come over and hang out. We parted ways after graduation but kept in contact. I went to college and he went to a vo-tech school. A year or two later we both ended up back in our hometown. He wanted to take me out and I agreed, figuring he had matured during his time in vo-tech. So he comes to pick me up at my grandma's house, where I was raised. He drove up with his radio blasting and the windows down. His seat was so far back he could barely see over the dash and was almost laying down. I was raised in a very strict household and he was very familiar with the kind of things that my family and I, being raised by them, found acceptable. He peeled out of my grandma's driveway, radio blasting, barely able to see over the wheel. I was so embarrassed. The whole movie date he acted like a total jerk. He acted like a trashy grease monkey from some S-exist muscle car movie the whole time. It was nowhere near the guy I had spent most of my childhood with. I was so offended that he thought I would even remotely be into that. I didn't want to go on a date with a musclehead. I wanted to go on a date with the guy who had been my best friend, who shared my love of video games and talked with me about our individual dreams and ideas. There wasn't a second date. Later I found out from his friends, like a year later, that he was telling everyone that we were dating, he was helping pay my bills, and that we were talking about moving in together. How can you be productive despite having ADHD? The second best advice I ever heard for this was to begin every study session with a small task that has a 100% success rate. This can be something like charging your phone, cleaning your monitor, or even just setting up your desk to study. Once the first item on your to-do list is easily done, you will naturally want to complete the second. And this advice works, but it's not going to single-handedly revolutionize your life. The third best advice I ever heard was to invest in your own health. Cutting out processed food is the least you can do. Replace sugary drinks with focused drinks, and choose snacks that boost productivity such as nuts, bananas, dark chocolate, and blueberries. You don't actually need to quit drinking coffee, you're just better off replacing your daily Starbucks with a focused coffee like Clarity Brew. These kinds of focus coffees will always get people with ADHD better results because stuff like Clarity Brew is designed to minimize the caffeine jitters and lengthen productivity bursts, and it's the easiest trick to minimize the effects of ADHD in the short term. The fourth best advice was to find a buddy, ideally someone who is slightly more productive than you, and have them hold you accountable to certain goals. This works especially well for ADHD adults who need help finding motivation to keep a clean home. Fifth best is understanding that the root of all productivity is motivation. Make a list of everything that motivates you and put it somewhere easily accessible like your phone wallpaper. Now, whenever you need to do a task, read through everything that motivates you, maybe even say it out loud. If you still find yourself able to avoid the task, then you need to add to your list. Keep adding until it works. But by far, the best advice I ever heard for enhancing productivity for people with ADHD was this: that sometimes, you need to reverse engineer success. You need to make your environment work for you, not against you. Find a different workspace for different types of work so that you start to associate each environment with the work you do there, like consistently using your desk for math homework, a coffee shop for essays, the dining table for history, and so on. Over time, you will have used classical conditioning techniques discovered by Ivan Pavlov to make your brain automatically enter the necessary mental state for the specific task you're going to do. Over time, you'll realize the strength of the mental connections you're forming, and you'll start to want to do math every time you sit at your desk, not because you like it, but simply because your brain thinks that's what needs to happen now. Then, after finishing a task, I'll sit down and reward myself with a nice big cup of mushroom coffee, Clarity Brew being my preferred choice, to feel even more productive and refocus on the next task. What are some guys' secrets we keep from the girls? When our nuts feel itchy, we grab the spot, twist and pinch. We put out nuts on the table corner when it's at our height because it just feels good to rest our stuff there. Removing our balls from our thighs on a hot day is the best feeling. Imagine taking tape off your leg and how satisfying that is. That's what it feels like. We come in the sink sometimes because it's easy to just rinse away the stuff. We hide out boners around our underwear waistband, and it's risky because the head of our PP is out, so if our shirt is lifed, then we are done for, but the waistband provides a pull so that it's not sticking out or obvious. After we come, we feel terrible, and we get the most clarity one can possibly achieve about life, and most of the time regret doing it. We usually shower after we jerk off because we want to wash off the smell, and it's a good feeling to clean up after you have done the dirty deed. We do smash or pass all the time when there are girls walking in the streets or mall near us, sometimes to receive a Smash of the Day award, which goes to the hottest girl we see. We hate the testing phase. We get that you have had bad boyfriends, but come on. We don't think about intimacy when we really like a girl. Usually you can tell how a guy feels about you after you guys have sex. If he stays, then he likes you. Sometimes our penis hits the toilet bowl. When we see another man, we immediately ask who's stronger and who would win in a fight. We wish you would make the first move, or at least be more obvious about your hints. We pretend like we don't like when your privates aren't shaved, but deep down we kind of like it. What happens when a bar serves a person who's not of age? I used a subtle and clever technique. I asked for ID. See, people who are underage very often don't happen to have their ID on them. They left it in the car. They left it in their other pants. Their wallet was stolen. It's amazing how many different things happen to their ID. Now, here's the thing. Sometimes a person who isn't underage doesn't have their ID on them. It does happen. But if you can't produce your ID, I'm not required to serve you. In fact, arguably, once I've asked, I have to assume you are underage. Anyway, there's a second line of defense. If you produced an ID, I looked at the date of birth. I had one of those page-a-day calendars from the ABC which told me the cutoff date for that day taped to a post next to my workstation. If you were born after that date, you were underage. On 2 occasions, I had someone come up to the bar and place an order. I ID'd them. They tried to beg off. I held firm and refused to serve them without an ID, and then they produced their ID, which was in a nice case with a badge. They were there with the ABC checking up on compliance, and wanted to thank me for my work, and asked to see my manager. Serve someone underage, you can get a $5,000 fine, and the venue can lose its license. Refuse to serve someone who is of age but can't produce ID? The company loses a few bucks, the price of the beer they would have purchased, and you may lose a tip. Probably not. People who don't know to carry an ID don't tend to be tippers, and maybe you get a bonus from management.
Women, what's a random act of kindness you did but never bothered to tell anyone about it? A complete stranger jizzed on me because of something stupid that I said to them. A couple months ago I met a college student at my job, but if you told me she was 60 years old I would have believed you. It was solely because of the way she looked, but I wasn't judging her just to be a beach. It's my job as an esthetician to analyze a person's skin and prepare the best treatments to make them look flawless. So far, I've been able to achieve this goal with every rich client that enters our high-end spa. However, just looking at my client I knew this was going to be my most difficult job yet, and I wasn't going to let her be my first unhappy client that doesn't get to experience the effects of being pretty. At first glance, I could already see the problem with my client's skin. She had crow's feet, forehead lines, and lines that ran from her mouth to her chin. But when she sat on my facial bed and I saw her skin up close, I could see that I really had to put in the work and hours with her. She was unlike my rich clientele, because she had pores the size of golf balls, skin blemishes and acne, and her face was so red I thought she was blushing when she saw me. I immediately got straight to work after thoroughly analyzing what I needed to do to make sure she left with a cleaner face. I started off with cleansing her skin and removing dead skin cells to even out her skin tone and make her rough skin smooth. Then I used a facial steamer to open up her pores so that it was easier and less painful to extract them. We were already halfway into our session and she hadn't said a word. I'm a blabbermouth and the silence was killing me. So while I was mixing her bowl of cucumber I told her I thought it was great that old women were taking care of their skin too, since most of our clientele are young women who are 20 to 40 years old. She sat upright on the bed and asked me how old I thought she was. I told her I thought she was a grandma, and that I didn't know retirement homes allowed visits to the spa. In an instant, she looked redder than when she first walked in, and I knew I messed up. She grabbed the bowl I was mixing and threw it at me. I looked down at my slimy covered clothes that looked like someone had jizzed all over me, and asked her why she would do that. I had half a mind to fire her as a client and ban her from the spa, but she slammed her ID in my face, and after some quick mental math I realized she was actually 22. She stood there with her hands crossed and eyebrows furrowed. I immediately apologized for being rude and unprofessional. I was even in the middle of debating between giving her a discount or a free session to make up for my insults. But then she asked me why I thought she was in a retirement home, and I told her that she had more wrinkles than any 22-year-old I knew. She sat down on my facial bed and said I was right, and that I wasn't the first person to think she was so old. She said all her friends were embarrassed to have her around, so they just stopped inviting her to places, and whenever she talked to guys they said they weren't interested in cougars. She started using tons of makeup to cover her face up, but it ended up looking cakey from how much she had to put just to cover her pores. She choked back a sob and she nearly broke down on my facial bed. I couldn't just sit there and watch her cry, so I told her that I had something she could use, and showed her the sunscreen that our spa sells. I explained that we sell a growth factor sunscreen because it doesn't have any harmful chemicals, rubs out clear instead of an annoying white cast, and its gel-like texture feels great on the skin. The sunscreen protects the skin while rejuvenating it as well. My client asked me how that would help, and I told her that I treat high-end clientele who religiously buy the growth factor sunscreen every time they come in for a treatment. I never had to treat them for wrinkles, acne, or other skin conditions like I had to do with her, or any of my other non-high-end clients, because the rich people's skin was always flawless. They just came in for a relaxing spa day. I explained that this was only the case with my rich clients, because they decide to spend a bit more on sunscreen than the average person, but it saves them thousands on other skincare products and extensive treatments from me. And I was sure that if she saw them, she would assume they had work done because they didn't have any wrinkles or hyperpigmentation and looked young, despite being older than my client. But the rich don't compromise their skin. Instead, they maintain their natural beauty by using things like the growth factor sunscreen. I made sure to tell my client that my rich clientele apply the sunscreen every day, not just on sunny days, because UV rays still penetrate windows and clouds, and it prevents their skin from being damaged and breaking out. That's why they invest in it, and they never have to worry about hyperpigmentations and breakouts or any other skin problems that normal people have. My client then asked how a sunscreen was able to keep rich people from aging, so I explained that the growth factor sunscreen had a clinically studied ingredient called kynotin. Kynotin prevents aging in the skin by protecting the DNA and skin cells from all sorts of damage. It directly reduces roughness on the skin, wrinkles, and uneven pigmentation as well. Since my client had wrinkled skin, applying something with kynotin on her skin would improve the feeling of her skin, to make it soft and smooth. I recommended she use the sunscreen too if she wanted naturally perfect skin like my rich clients, but she almost freaked out when she saw the price. I explained to her that people spend thousands on clothes, makeup, and equipment to make their bodies look good. However, our skin is one of the only things you can never take off, so you can never cheap out on it. Buying cheap skincare products means your skin isn't getting the highest quality of protection and care that it needs, so this will definitely ruin your skin in the future. That's why the rich tend to spend more on their skincare products, especially their sunscreen, because the most important part of your skincare routine is SPF protection, and that's why their skin looks better than all poor people's skin. Besides, we really needed to get the fundamentals right, otherwise, she'll have to live with damaged, wrinkly skin for the rest of her life, and never have a chance at clear skin. To further ease her mind, I mentioned that the growth factor sunscreen doubles as a primer, so she could implement it in her makeup routine and it wouldn't make her face cakey. That way, her makeup would look flawless and she would be protecting her skin barrier when she goes outside. After explaining it that way, she agreed to use the sunscreen daily, and I scheduled her for a follow-up appointment in 3 weeks after I finished her free session. When she returned, I barely recognized her until she slammed her ID in my face again. Once she sat down on my facial bed, she let me know that she applied the sunscreen every day and she couldn't believe how much her complexion had changed. Her skin looked smoother and healthier, and she liked how pretty that made her look. Every time she applied it, she had a rejuvenating feeling that gave her more confidence to tackle her day. And honestly, it seemed like it calmed her stress, which meant she wasn't getting new wrinkles on her face. Her crow's feet were nearly gone, and the lines that ran from her mouth to her chin, which weren't that apparent to begin with, were fully gone. She also got rid of all her other skincare products because the growth factor sunscreen was the only thing she actually needed to clear her skin. She talked about how applying sunscreen while indoors made a huge difference to her face because it always gave her a consistent natural look, and she could feel her skin barrier improving. With that, her skin blemishes disappeared and her cheeks weren't nearly as red as the first time I saw her. Now that her skin was improving, everyone around her noticed the difference. She told me that people were being nicer to her in public, so she was finally making friends again, and she was getting free treats from guys at stores and getting called pretty, along with them asking for her number. She said people usually kept their distance from her and she wasn't used to all the attention, but she really liked it. This made her stress levels drop dramatically. Surprisingly, she also mentioned that her mom had started using the growth factor sunscreen and her skin was hydrated so well she was looking younger by the day. I told her that the difference between people who use growth factor sunscreen versus normal sunscreen is that they will look younger, like they're in their 20s, while others will look more like grandmas, like she at first looked like when I saw her. She didn't appreciate that comment, but at least she'll stop being called a cougar now. Keep in mind, the only thing she was using on her skin was a growth factor sunscreen by Sunray, and her skin was already starting to clear up. I knew now that her fundamentals were getting set. All that was left was treating her pores and other acne problems, and I was glad she was finally starting to be happy with her appearance. Since the first time I saw her I almost threw up too.
I found my little brother who ran away from home 10 years ago. My younger brother ran away from home when I was 14. Apparently my mother beat him pretty often and disowned him after he broke a new TV while playing football in the house. She says she didn't mean it and it was just disciplining him, and said that in the heat of the moment. My brother was always one of those troublesome kids, carefree, a little too adventurous, but he had a good heart and I loved him very much. At first we thought he would just come back, then hours went by, we started to get worried. After a day we started to search for him, we asked around, called the cops and filed a missing person report. We searched for him for a long time and never found him. His disappearance tore my family apart. My dad blamed my mom and they divorced shortly after my 15th birthday. The relationship between my grandparents and my mom deteriorated. Fast forward to about a month ago, I got a job as an intern at a logistic company. I am an assistant as a driver dispatcher. One of the driver's names caught my attention a week ago. It was exactly the same as my brother's. The driver came back about 3 days ago from his shipment and I have been kind of observing him. And he kind of looks like my brother. He resembles my dad. And I don't know if I'm the one who's making these observations because I want to or the resemblance is actually there. Now I've been sleepless for days wondering if I should approach him. What if it's not him? I am a shy person and not really good with people. Will he think I'm crazy? Should I at least do some more homework before I approach him? And what it's him? Should I tell my parents? Am I the a-hole for breaking my girlfriend's heart? My girlfriend and I met online. Before I met her I was with another girl who cheated on me with her best friend and I thought I was going to just stay single for a while. But then I met my current girlfriend and I immediately fell in love. We had a really good relationship. She made me feel loved and cared for and I did everything I could do to make her feel the same. We did everything together and always lifted each other up when the other was down. We even had a set of beautiful twin girls together. Eventually, I ended up doing something to hurt her. I started paying girls for hot pictures of themselves. One of which was a friend of hers and watching lots of dirty videos and neglecting our relationship. I spent lots of our money and caused us to struggle when we shouldn't have been. After so long of doing that, I ended up downloading an anonymous chat app and started getting hot pictures of women on it and I even sent some hot pictures of me to one girl for trade. Eventually, shortly after our girls were born, my girlfriend found out. It destroyed her and caused her to become extremely insecure. I ended up making her postpartum depression extremely worse. I caused her to barely remember the first few months of our girls' lives and now she feels like a terrible mother. I never physically cheated on her but I still hurt her similar to the way my girlfriend before her hurt me and I hate myself for it and I've wanted to hurt myself so many times because of it. She has forgiven me since and we are having our third kid but I can see it still hurts her to this day and I still have thoughts of hurting myself to make amends for what I have done. I still feel like I'm a bad boyfriend and don't deserve her.
Ex-K-pop trainees, what's the craziest thing you had to do to become a K-pop idol? Everyone hears about the ridiculous diets and crazy practice hours, but no one tells you about the stigma around sleep in K-pop. In my agency, all the girls were explicitly given a list of things that they needed to improve on at the end of our monthly evaluations. Basically, the instructors would say, your dance needs the most work, then your rap, then your facial expressions, then you should focus on doing these exercises to build this muscle group on your body, and then work on increasing your vocal range, and so on. By the next monthly evaluation, they would specifically measure your improvement in the areas they talked about with you. Even if you were good overall, you would be kicked out if you hadn't improved enough because the coaches believed that stagnation in improvement meant that your potential was exhausted. It was brutal. So, when the instructors gave you that list of things to improve upon, what they were really saying is, these are the things you need to work on every single day. You should only eat, socialize, or sleep after practicing all of these first. I personally struggled a lot with dance, and since we lived in the dorms with our agency, there was no way to escape our instructors. If my dance instructor ever saw me eating, she would ask me if I had already practiced a few hours that day. Sometimes she made me stop eating my food and do footwork in front of everyone to test me. The worst part was sleep. No one gets to take naps, because if you take a nap in the middle of the day, the other girls would tell the instructors that you were sleeping and then the instructors would yell at you for getting distracted. The perfect day according to the agency was to spend 2 hours on every single thing we were told to improve upon at the previous monthly examination, and sleep only at the end, which usually meant we could get 2 to 3 hours of sleep maximum. The idols you see today are the ones who managed to survive through it. I was never more relieved than when I was finally kicked out.
As a doctor or nurse, what's the nastiest thing you've seen a visitor do with a patient? Not a medical professional, but I could easily qualify as a professional patient. This happened to me. I had just endured a 9-hour surgery on my lumbar spine, and been transferred from recovery to a semi-private room. The pain was unbelievable despite the fentanyl and morphine pump I was attached to, and I was still groggy from anesthesia. Enter my roommate. She was admitted for observation for a broken ankle. Classic southern middle-aged perky church lady. Very perky. Not long after she arrived, followed by husband carrying a monogrammed, riotously floral overnight bag, her church entourage arrived in our small room. My bed was surrounded by my worried husband and parents. At least 10 people crowded her side of the room, spilling over into my side. Not one of these people seemed to notice there was anyone in the other bed, and proceeded to bump into and even sit on the end of my bed, ignoring my cries of pain whenever the bed was jostled. To add to my misery, all these people in a very small, inadequately ventilated room brought the ambient temperature up into the very high 80s. I have had asthma all my life and have developed a phobia of warm, still air. It makes me feel as if I am suffocating. Each time the bed was jostled and I cried out in pain, my husband would politely ask that the crowd not touch my bed. They ignored him. You have to understand at this point that the hub is a very prim and proper Brit and not prone to rude outbursts. Also, His mom was a London nurse during World War II in the Blitz, and eventually emigrated to the US, where she became the night administrator at now closed Henrotin Hospital in Chicago. So the baby boy knows his way around the hospital. Finally, the Hubs announced that I had had a serious surgery that day and they were hampering my recovery, and he would appreciate it if they would abide by the hospital rules of a 2-visitor limit. After a silent pause to take this in, we lived in Georgia at the time, and his very proper English accent always commanded a bit of respect, and the pastor sat on the end of my bed, squashing my feet and causing me to scream. My parents assisted him back to his feet, and my hubby disappeared amidst the confusion. He returned in less than 5 minutes with the night admin in tow. She flushed out all the visitors and slapped a no visitors sign on the door. Family members are not considered visitors at this hospital. Moral of the story: don't check your manners at the door when you are visiting someone in a hospital setting. There are actually sick people there.
My parents gave me an ultimatum: break up with my boyfriend or live without them. I am an only child, and my current boyfriend and I have been dating for 6 years, starting when I was 19 and he was 20. We met at junior college, where we started dating, and after that we went to different colleges but within an hour of each other. My parents met him early on by joining us at dinner. Everything seemed to go well. Then soon after, we went to his parents' house, who live about 2 hours from my parents, so I could meet his family, and after learning this my mom told me how hurt she was that we didn't come to see them too. I expressed that this weekend was for me to meet his family, but it was clear that she felt almost betrayed. Fast forward, my parents invite me up to our cabin and my boyfriend joins. We take my car because it was already loaded with laundry etc. After we arrive, my dad pulls me aside and pretty much quietly yells at me how wrong it is that I drove and then that we took my car. He's the man, he should be driving blah blah blah. This started everything going forward on a sour note. The cabin is in Tahoe, it gets cold in the winter, so my boyfriend wore a sweatshirt with his hood up during some of the time at the cabin. My parents to this day see this as weird and rude, as well as a reason they don't like him. As we continue our relationship, it's clear that my parents don't like him, but they can't really give up what I would call good or justifiable reasons. They'll say he's just not a good fit for the family. They don't tell me to stop dating him, because they can't. I'm an adult, but they do tell me that I need to keep them and him separate. They don't want to really hear about him, and he's not welcome at their house or cabin. He's never cheated on me, abused me, he has no drug problems etc., nothing that a normal parent would cite as a problem. Eventually it became an ultimatum given to me by my parents. They tell me that if you continue to date him, eventually it will be either him or us and you'll have to choose. Among other things, they would tell me that he'd never be an attorney, which is what he wanted to do, and insinuating that he probably wouldn't be much of anything at all. After undergrad I started working at a financial firm. He graduated from undergrad at UC Berkeley and was accepted to law school across the country. We were always very serious about each other and made the decision to go long distance until he graduated and moved back to CA. My boyfriend has since graduated from law school, moved home, and took the bar last month. He starts work this October, and has had a contract since last year. They have known about this as well. Now, 6 years into our relationship, I call my parents and tell them that we are going to be moving in together. About 20 minutes later I get a text from my mom, saying that she doesn't want to rain on my parade, but that this path excludes her and my dad from my future. That they love me but they can't be in my life if I choose to be with my boyfriend. I told them I would never understand. Since then, they have sent me more and more text messages saying stuff like we feel like we're losing our daughter, this is heartbreaking etc., and all at the same time including that this is my choice and my fault. I texted my parents that I thought my boyfriend and I should come over and talk, that texting about this kind of thing is stupid, but not to be patronized or belittled, and if it turned to screaming that we would leave. My parents then replied that they wanted to see me face to face to talk, but that my boyfriend isn't allowed. My boyfriend even called my father the night of the initial "we can't be part of your life" text to try and talk or meet up and see if there was a way to talk through any legitimate concerns. My dad did not answer and responded until a week plus later, only to text him that they haven't really ever liked him, that he wants to work through it with me alone, and it's my and my boyfriend's fault for not trying to address things earlier. Among other ridiculous reasons to not like my boyfriend were Berkeley isn't a man's college. My dad. One time in college, my professor lost my final exam, and when I found out via my final grades and was frantically calling her to figure out what happened, my parents told my boyfriend, see, this is why we didn't want her to have a boyfriend in college. They found ways to blame him for everything. The only thing that ever had any merit was that he wasn't working yet. Well, this was because he was going to school to be a lawyer. Apparently marrying someone who will make a lot of money is a bad thing. My boyfriend is the nicest, most calm and peaceful person ever, and he loves me more than anything. But apparently their pride is more important than being wrong and accepting him. I guess I'm just trying to figure out if this is normal? Or if it's as wrong as it feels to my boyfriend and I. My parents gave me an ultimatum. Break up with my boyfriend or live without them. After many more hurtful texts from my parents that said they can't accept my partner and that it doesn't matter if he's a good fit for me, if he's not a good fit for my family then it's never going to work out, I went over in person to meet with them and pick up my legal documents. They made it clear that my boyfriend was not welcome and that this was a family matter they needed to speak with only me about. Clear manipulation obviously, so I went alone. I'm on my way, I know what I think and how I feel, I'm very sure of what I plan on saying. It was strange, Walking into your parents' house and feeling like you're meeting strangers. Kind of felt like having a 26-year-long relationship and being broken up with via text, then having to go pick up your crap and memories from your ex's house. Except that ex is your parents. After about an hour of small talk, we got into the nitty-gritty convo about the elephant in the room. A previous text that week had said, "We don't expect to change your mind, we just want to talk." But it's clear that this in-person meeting was a last-ditch attempt to shake me from my reality and into theirs. They came at me from every angle. "He's not a man's man, Dad, I don't respect him. Dad, I hate him. He's taking away the most precious thing in our life. How could you not hate someone like that? Dad," even at some point physically threatening him. My mom was either agreeing or adding little tidbits and reminders of things she doesn't like about him. Some of which are things I mentioned in my previous post about when I went to meet his family and didn't see her and my dad too. Mentioning also that she doesn't like that I made the first move to talk to my boyfriend and not the other way around. You get the gist. It was all out war on my boyfriend. They tell me I'm depriving them of a son-in-law. They say he is selfish for not breaking up with me. Years ago when he realized that my parents didn't like him. They even just started blindly throwing out shots like I don't even know if he has any friends. Like what the F, Mom and Dad, of course you don't complain about him because you've made me keep my relationship out of earshot for 6 years, but I digress. It ended up being a 3-hour-long conversation where I spoke for all of maybe 5 minutes with my heart rate at 150 the whole time. Thanks for reminding me of that Apple Watch. They also don't fail to mention a few other shining points such as, "We knew you would put this on us, this is not an ultimatum, we are just reacting to your decision and choices." Was their reply to my saying, "This is not my choice, this is an ultimatum you've given me and neither my boyfriend or I want this. We knew you would make us the bad guys because we're not #teen boyfriend's name." Any of your friends and family who say we will come around or it will get better is lying to you and saying what you want to hear. They asked me why they should like or be impressed by my boyfriend. I told them various accolades. Dad replied with, "Education doesn't impress me." I told them how wonderful he was through some of the toughest times in my life, college, and how he supported and kept me sane when even my parents were coming down on me about how I wasn't doing enough. They said that's what any boyfriend would do. No, Mom and Dad, it's not, and the two of you certainly were making me feel worse that entire time. They said because my boyfriend's dad helped him get through school by paying his tuition that he's had everything in his life handed to him. My dad said, "I think your mom is having an epiphany about who you're becoming. Like I'm some monster." They said, "We feel like you're not listening to us because I'm not just blindly agreeing to break up with my boyfriend." Dad said this kind of thing happens all the time, as if that makes it normal or justified. In the end, I have to break the news that in between all of the hurtful texts and prior to this meeting, my boyfriend and I signed a lease and moved in together. Nothing they were going to say was going to sway me otherwise, even if they said that. So we had taken the leap and made the move the weekend before this meeting. I was commuting about 20 to 30 minutes before the move, and my commute is the same after the move. Only difference is we now live in the same city that my boyfriend, new attorney with crazy early and late hours, works in. Believe me, I had all kinds of requirements prior to this move. It has to be safe, have a unit washer and dryer, safe parking, etc., and it's only for a year or two while we save dollars so we can buy a home. Contrary to my parents' belief, I'm capable of rational decisions. I tell them first that we signed the lease and where it is, to try and lighten the blow that I am outright disobeying them. They start going off about how, of course, making it easy on him again. They saw me always going to my boyfriend's house as me catering to him, even though the only reason was because we were never comfortable being together at their house. Then of course he became essentially banished. So they see this move as me being some smitten teenaged idiot, not about how this is a relationship with compromise. They tell me that my commute is going to be brutal and that I'm lying to myself if I think it's not. Again, I have already been doing it for a week. I know it's not any worse, it's a prettier drive even, but it's clear that I can't slowly ease into it and I have to just rip off the band-aid because they are straight up just wrong and trying to convince me that I don't know what I'm talking about. So I say, I've already been doing IT for a week. We moved in last weekend. They are just dumbfounded. Like, I thought you guys said you weren't planning on changing my mind, so why so surprised that I just went ahead and made my choice? My mom starts crying. My dad keeps saying, "You effed up kid." It's about 10 p.m. at this point, so now that they know I have a slightly longer drive home, they are kind of sweeping me out the door so I can get home before it gets too much later. My mom gives me this big sobbing hug. At this point I've run out of tears. I was crying throughout the entire conversation, but at this point was just over the bull. My dad, who rarely even tells me that he loves me, gives me this awkward desperate hug too that just kind of makes me roll my eyes. I get in the car and drive home just totally exhausted and confused. Truthfully, they did a good job of again making me question my own thoughts and choices. But I get home and just start spilling everything that they said to my boyfriend. He's not surprised, but as I said in my last post, he remains Swiss in all of this and doesn't say anything crappy about them. He just holds me close and lets me vent. Something else that came up during our lovely 3-hour discussion was my anxiety. I have previously shared with them that I think they are a huge source of it and had been throughout my childhood as well. Prior discussions have always gone nowhere. "You had it so easy, we don't ask that much of you," etc. Clearly not listening to me. So I brought it up again in this discussion. How my parents are a huge source of anxiety and my boyfriend is a calm rock in all of it, that I'm so grateful he's such a great partner. My dad screams at me how he never laid a effing hand on me and how he was physically disciplined as a child and that he can't own that he and they could have anything to do with my being an anxious person. He even says you need therapy. Like, yes dad, thank you, I sure do, and also F you. Also said I have a hard time swallowing that I had anything to do with your anxiety, you're going to have to work out those demons with yourself. All of this to say, the answer you've all waited for is that I moved in with my boyfriend, am keeping mom and dad at arm's length, and also I have started therapy. It's 26 years of emotional abuse and narcissism to unpack and learn from, but I'm working through it. The guilt tripping and lack of boundaries is so real and has been so real for forever. I know my situation isn't as bad as others and is also worse than others, but for all of you out there in similar situations, seek therapy. It is a really good thing. There's so much behavior to unlearn and grow from. Even if you don't think it's that bad and that you're doing fine, see a therapist if you can. Your abusers have learned behavior too, they have learned how to get to you and how to manipulate you, whether it's vindictive or not. They have learned how to make you do what they want and think what they think, and then they know how to make you feel horrible about doing anything differently. The cops failed me, but a crackhead came to my rescue. I was in Atlanta behind the Variety Playhouse with some friends and my new boyfriend. We're all teenagers at the time. They smoke grass and I don't, so before we get out of the car, they all pass around a Quickie J, which I didn't smoke. About 2 minutes later, a cop is pounding on the driver's side window and forces everyone out of the car. Turns out, they'd been watching the whole time, and were laughingly disappointed that I hadn't smoked. They weren't interested in stopping a crime or anything, they just wanted to bust as many of us as possible. So everyone except me is in handcuffs on the ground when the wagon pulls up an hour later to cart all of them to jail. It's dark, the parking lot is now empty, and I realized these cops were planning on just leaving me there. I explained that I didn't have a license and begged them to take me. Cell phones weren't a thing at the time. They told me to call a cab. I explained that I lived over an hour away from Atlanta and didn't have that kind of cab fare, so they told me to walk. I begged them, crying, to at least drop me off at the store on the corner, and they laughed, told me I wasn't their problem but I could call them back when I needed someone to scrape up what was left of me. My boyfriend was crying, and had me grab the keys out of his pocket while the others were screaming directions home through the door of the wagon, and then I was alone. A crackhead intimacy worker lady found me and walked with me up to the store, where I tried to use their busted payphone. She hung out with me and chased off all the creeps who were soliciting me. We sat on the corner for a while until another dude wandered up, asking when Marta started up again. It's like 2 in the morning and Marta doesn't run for a few more hours. When he realizes I have a car, he tells me he's staying at a place right next to I-85 and if I can drop him off, he can show me how to get home. He pumped gas for me. Because I never had, and I drove with my door partially cracked open just in case he tried anything, but he didn't. I dropped him off, the interstate was literally across the street, and I managed to drive home on my own even though I didn't have a license and had never driven such a long distance on my own before. So now, when people tell you to call a crackhead instead of the cops next time you need help, I have a perfect example of how crackheads were actually more helpful than cops.
Serious, people who were named for negative reasons in suicide letters, what is your story? How did their death impact your life? My father committed suicide 7 years ago when I was 23. We were never particularly close growing up but always had this unspoken father-slash-son bond where we just did things together without saying any words. In the months leading up to his death he would write to me and try calling, but I always felt uncomfortable talking about feelings etc., so I ignored it for a later day. My sister on the other hand talked to him regularly, even on the morning he died. His suicide letter arrived a few days later with my birthday card. His letter was a paragraph long and had a gift voucher to a bottle shop, Dan Murphy's in Australia. My older sister however received a 2-page letter with his iPod and books on grieving. Very big difference. I can never tell if my short goodbye letter was the unspoken bond, or if he was genuinely pissed off I didn't give him the time of day to hear him out. Ever since, no matter how minuscule it might seem, I'll always give people the time of day to lend an ear. What's the worst pain you have personally experienced? A long-term constipation that finally decided it was time to go. You know those stomach cramps you get when you have bowel stomach problems? Okay, so, kick the pain up by about 4x and make it last an entire day. For most of the day nothing came out and I barely felt anything move. I tried laying down, chugging water, exercising etc., basically everything you're supposed to do short of laxatives to help initiate a bowel movement. Just this constant pain that would randomly get really sharp like I was getting stabbed for a minute at a time and make me feel like I needed to throw up. Got to a point I passed out from exhaustion at one point. Finally, near the end of the day the main blockage finally passed and everything just flowed out. Cannot properly articulate how much relief I felt once it was over. Best way I can describe the whole thing is trying to pass a brick followed by gravel. Just an overall terrible experience.
I took my best friend's brother to climb trees. I didn't mean for it to happen. I grew up in Norway and I loved climbing trees. One day my friends and I headed down to the river to do some climbing. My friend's younger brother, Kevin, was carrying the backpack full of snacks and I was carrying the backpack full of drinks. Kevin was not as experienced, but like any little brother he wasn't going to let that stand in his way from annoying his big brother by tagging along. We were almost to the part of the tree where we'd be able to sit. I got there first and I hung my backpack up on a tree branch. I then told Kevin to pass me his backpack so I could hang it on the branch. While he was passing me his backpack, his foot slipped off the branch and he fell the whole way down the tree. He landed in the river onto jagged rocks and died instantly. My friend and I were out of that tree faster than a black man to a bucket of KFC, and what we saw that day changed us forever. All he wanted to do was hang out with his big brother, doing what the big kids were doing. Years later I wonder if I never told him to pass me his backpack would we all be in a tree right now drinking a beer thinking back on all our adventures. Instead, my childhood best friend can no longer be in the same room as me. Everyone told me it wasn't my fault and it could have happened to anyone, but that doesn't erase the guilt. I have come a long way since the incident and finally feel ready to reach out to the family and see how they are doing. Edit, I managed to get in contact with my childhood best friend through some friends we went to school with. Apparently he's been trying to find me for the past few years as well. We had a really amazing talk and he doesn't blame me for what happened, and neither does his parents. Today I effed up by banging my first cousin. So, didn't happen today, but last weekend. Finally getting around to really processing it all and I guess trying to deal with it. Went out for drinks with my girlfriend and met up with my younger cousin at the bar. We'd all hung out once before and had a great time. My cousin invited a couple of her friends to the bar too. We did some bar hopping. I got shit-faced pretty unintentionally. The last bar was, I swear, not putting any mixers in my cocktails, they were straight alcohol. So anyway we're about to leave and my cousin's friends are trying to get her home, because she's shit-faced too. Well, my girlfriend was our DD so we offered to let her stay in our spare room. Everyone was cool with that because who's safer than family, right? Wrong. We get home and, I had to piece together some of this later because I blacked out for most of it. Apparently initially everything was cool. My cousin went to the spare room and my girlfriend got her situated. The problem started a little later when I, in my infinite wisdom, decided to walk straight out of my bedroom with my girlfriend in it, and into my cousin's room. I don't particularly remember much except for two details which I guess are not important to the story. Well, okay so one might be. I remember her giving me a very enthusiastic BJ, which, as you can imagine, makes a lot of noise. Apparently after a while my girlfriend came out of the room wondering where I was because I just effing disappeared. She didn't barge into the room or anything, but she heard the noises which is pretty effing obvious. So at that point, she left. Like, me. She left me, and I don't blame her. Anyway that means I wake up the next morning, having blacked out, oblivious that my girlfriend was gone already, but I'm effing naked next to my naked cousin. There's liquid kids all over the bed where her face was, she didn't even sleep with a pillow. There's obviously no hiding this but I'm still half drunk and I went to try to go sneak back into my room, which I found empty. So yeah. I haven't heard from my girlfriend all week, and I'm sure we're done, and I don't blame her. All I can hope for now is that this shit doesn't get out to my family, because I would probably implode. No, my cousin and I are not going to start hooking up regularly. It's actually super awkward and she has hardly said a word to me either. Again, I don't blame her. My stalker mom called the cops on my boyfriend. I'm in the middle of an absolute nightmare, and I don't know what to do. Last night, my mother called the cops on my boyfriend, and I'm feeling completely torn between the two people I love most in the world. I've been dating my boyfriend for 2 years now, and we've been living together for the past 6 months. We've had our ups and downs, like any couple, but overall, things have been great. I've always been close to my mom, but she's always been a little opinionated about my relationships. She's the type that thinks no one is good for her little girl. It is innocent in thought, but she is often quick to tell me that a man is no good for me. But recently, things have taken a dark turn. Last night, my boyfriend and I had an argument. It was nothing major, just a typical disagreement that escalated a bit. We both raised our voices, but there was no physical violence or anything like that. The only thing is that he was getting really loud with it and I was a little unnerved by it. But he wasn't coming after me. We were in our own apartment, so I didn't think much of it. But then, out of nowhere, my mom showed up. She has a spare key to our place, and she let herself in. I was shocked and asked her why she was there. She said she was worried about me and wanted to check on me. I assured her that everything was fine, but she wouldn't listen. I had no idea why she even knew that something was up. Instead, she called the cops, claiming that my boyfriend was threatening me. The police arrived, and it was a complete disaster. My boyfriend was taken away for questioning, and I was left in tears, trying to explain that the argument was blown way out of proportion. Now, my boyfriend is furious, and my mom is insisting that she did the right thing to protect me. I'm stuck in the middle, feeling betrayed by my own mother and deeply hurt by what she did to my relationship. I don't know how to move forward from this. Has anyone been through a similar situation? What should I do? My stalker mom called the cops on my boyfriend. After I bailed my boyfriend out of jail, we had a long talk. He was a little aggressive at first, but I just held my calm until he finally settled down enough to listen. I told him that I did not want her to call the cops at all, and that I would do anything to clear up his reputation. He understood my position better after our conversation and agreed to work on our communication and conflict resolution. We decided to give our relationship another chance, and I felt hopeful about our future together. However, the real bombshell came when I confronted my mother about her actions. Initially, she seemed apologetic for involving the police and assured me it was out of concern for my safety. But as the conversation progressed, she broke down and confessed something I never could have imagined. My mother admitted to having secretly installed cameras throughout my apartment, including in our bedroom and living areas. She had been spying on us for months, violating our privacy in the most invasive way possible. She told me it was to make sure he wouldn't hurt me. I raised my voice and asked how she could do this. I asked her if she was watching every single time my boyfriend and I had intimacy. She said it was on camera, but she swears that she looked away. I don't know if I believe her on that. I was devastated and felt completely violated. I demanded that she remove all the cameras immediately, and she began arguing with me. What if he hurts you and you have no proof? We started arguing loudly and my boyfriend walked in and told her to chill before he called the cops on her this time. She finally gave me the locations of the cameras and my boyfriend, and I searched the apartment thoroughly, and we did find hidden cameras exactly where she had described. My mother is now in therapy, and I've distanced myself from her for the time being. I'm considering involving the authorities due to the severity of her actions. But I don't want to hurt her either. Accidentally sent my nudes to my crush instead of my boyfriend. Okay, so today I effed up and sent a nude to my crush instead of my boyfriend. We had a small thing in the past, we made out intoxicated once but nothing ever came from it. He def knew I had a boyfriend. But he would always bug me about being his side girl, etc. Anyways, we snapped like every day all day up until last year when I told him I was seeing someone and he was like, damn, guess on a live, stop snapping you, and I was like, frown. Then 2 days ago he pooped me up again for no reason and it started from there. Today we were just talking normal as usual and he had left me on delivered for a few hours, so I figured whatever, has probably playing COD or working on his car or something. Then he sent me a snap saying, sorry my phone died, but what were you gonna say last night? I have ADHD and slightly struggled with typing out the sentence I wanted to say, so I typed it in notes and took a screenshot of the sentence with the intention of sending it just cause I didn't feel like typing it out. Anyways, here comes the F up. So my boyfriend, who also knows about our past, had snapped me while I was typing out that sentence, and then something happened that was so much more interesting, so I was like, oh, on a live, finish this later, didn't open his snap, which is important. So then I went to my camera roll, clicked the screenshot of what I typed, sent it to him, exited out of Snapchat, did some other stuff on my phone, then locked it, forgetting that Snapchat automatically opens when you open messages. Then went back on Snapchat later tonight to show him pictures of my friend's cute cat and realized that none of our previous snaps were marked as read because when I exited out earlier when Snapchat was still open earlier, it never registered those snaps as being opened, which at first glance looked very odd because usually we leave each other on read all the time. So I click into our chat and I see that he sent a snap saying haha nice. Followed by a black screen with a viewfinder on it but Therese no timestamp. Then I was like, hold on a minute, I never sent him a picture of anything, then it pooped me. I am effing dead. I scrolled up and there it was. The screenshot I took in full screen with my nudes in the bottom left corner, followed by the 2 previous snaps, which were pictures of my cat and our convo, both of which weren't marked as open literally right above it. I quickly clicked out of it, turned off my phone and have been sitting here in shame ever since. What is your most disgusting secret? I had babysitters and family members force themselves onto me consistently from toddler to middle school ages. This developed into the fact that now I think of minors. I am attracted to them, but I wouldn't harm a fly. You'd convince me to end someone before you'd convince me it's okay to touch a child. I realize I am sick, but I have PTSD from the trauma. Nobody in my family knows this happened and only my partner knows about the events that happened to me and about my attraction, which my partner also has but shares the exact same sentiment I stated above. It was a weird conversation at first, but a relief to know I didn't have to keep it entirely to myself my entire life. I have not indulged in any form of corn regarding them. Just drawings. My vulnerable self went through that in high school while traversing the internet world with a mistreating boyfriend who convinced me it was okay to take explicit photos at 15. So yes, I understand the nuances surrounding all that much more personally than I'd like. I'm tired of being told to die or I deserve to die for something that I can't help that my brain does. Yeah, I'm working on discussing it in therapy, but finding a mental health provider to trust that isn't going to see kid attraction equals automatic threat is terrifying. I wouldn't hurt anyone. I couldn't bear to live if I put a child through the trauma that I now live with today. It sits painfully deep inside you, having this incredibly dark secret that nobody understands. Once you dead over due to anger or misunderstanding of what I am and how much I hate myself too. I don't like being this way. In fact, it adds to my self-deletion ideation at times to try to convince me I'm not worth living. I'm in my early 20s, so I have time to sort this out, certainly, but there's nowhere to talk about it. Nowhere to talk about how messed up you feel inside for it. It's painful and I hate myself for being like this. My 26 husband, 29, is obsessed with my boss, 38, and it's all my fault. I started this job about 1.5 years ago. I can't say what it is because I want us to stay anonymous and our country is very small, so my boss would probably be recognized. The moment I started I felt like I was in the right place. My boss, the owner of the company, is very cool and kind. She's self-made and she loves her job. She does a lot of the dirty work herself that bosses who has 30 to 35 employees wouldn't have to do. But she just loves it. On top of that, we have a 6-hour workday, our salaries are 20% higher than the market and we have 7 paid vacation weeks a year. Her reasons? She appreciates us and she's getting richer anyway. I was so proud of working with a woman like her, so I wouldn't shut up talking about her to my husband, especially in the beginning. My husband was as fascinated by her as I am until he met her in a company party last Christmas. She must have been beautiful when she was young. She could have been a model. I think his fascination became a crush or an obsession or maybe worse, love. Now he follows her on social media. Her accounts are private but he stalks her with my account. He also follows the company egg and likes every picture she's in. He asks about her all the time. She's a very private person, but when her divorce from her ex-husband was finalized in the beginning of this year, we all found out because he started showing up to work. He owned half her company now and he started to try to make changes in our work hours and salaries. We found out that her husband had cheated on her with a younger girl who he also tried to employ in our company. She still works with us. She, probably lawyers involved, eventually convinced her husband to sell her back his share. We're still in this process now. My husband has followed all this and he was so sad for her, and so angry. How could anyone do this when they had a woman like her? If it was him, he would cherish her, love her, blah blah blah. Who leaves a woman for a girl? I got very angry and told him that all men prefer younger women if they could choose. He laughed at me and told me only losers do that. The last drop was last Friday. We were out for a movie night and we saw my boss with a young man. He looked in his mid-20s. My husband lost it. He didn't know that she dated younger men. He wanted us to go say hello, but I refused and yelled at him to control himself because he looked pathetic. When we got home, he was frenetically going through her social media, until he found the guy and he sighed in relief. The guy was her nephew and we didn't see the whole company, but they were out with other family members. My husband was so happy, like a weight lifted off his chest. I lost it on him. I started crying and yelling and told him he was in love with her, and he was shocked when I pushed and kicked him out of our bedroom. I locked the door. He stood outside trying to calm me down, telling me he loved me and I'm his girl and always will be. Then he said something that ruined me even further. It's not like someone like her would look my way. I haven't slept since then. Why is he feeling like this? Is it love? Infatuation? She's too old for my husband, so what is it? And why would he think he couldn't have her? He's very handsome and still young. She should feel lucky a young handsome man likes her. And does he mean I'm less than her to accept him? Or is it purely her money and status? He refuses to admit anything. And what can I do now? I love this job. I love the benefits. Thanks to this job our life has improved and we can afford more than just the necessities. I'm starting to hate my boss though, and I hate myself for idolizing her in front of my husband. I saw my husband and my sister naked in my kitchen. I can't move. If I move, it becomes real and I have to accept what I saw and think of what's next. I came home from work early and saw my sister's car, thinking maybe she was dropping off some food from her job. But no, I walk in and see my husband and sister naked in my kitchen. The kitchen I paid for. As soon as I registered what I saw, I got into my car and left. I kept driving, just driving until I found the hotel I'm at now. I don't want to believe it. I don't know what to do. My sister, my only family, and my best friend, the one who's supposed to be there for me and support me. My husband, my person, my other half, the one who's supposed to love and respect me. The two most important people in my life have ruined everything. I've blocked them both on my phone. I don't want to hear any of the bullshit excuses they'll come up. I don't want to confront this. I want to go back to this morning when everything was fine. I didn't think I needed to explicitly say this, but by naked I meant they were butt naked and effing in the kitchen. I admit mentioning that I paid for the kitchen was odd and kinda funny. But anyone that knows me knows that the kitchen is my pride and joy, so yes, when I saw my sister and husband effing in my kitchen, it stuck with me. And yes, they did see me. When I got to the hotel I cried for a few hours and then I just wanted to tell someone, anyone. The two people I would talk to when something happened in my life were the two I needed to talk about, and it was 11 something in the evening, so I wasn't going to disrupt my friends' evenings and burden them. So instead I came to Reddit thinking not many would see it. One thing I did see a lot was to unblock them and keep the texts and calls as evidence, so I did do that. After posting in another good cry, I knew that I had to get my crap together. I didn't have my sister or any family to help, so I had to do it myself. I started researching what my next steps were. In the morning, my friend called me saying my sister contacted her wondering if I had been in contact with her. I told her what happened and she very kindly offered her spare room and her day off work to help me sort stuff out. I called in sick at my job and my friend helped get things done. I got in contact with my friend who works at a bank and she helped me start sorting my financials. My friend also found me a lawyer to consult with. After my phone consultation with the lawyer, I was so overwhelmed. I now know why so many women don't divorce their cheating husbands. It's such a lengthy, expensive, and emotionally draining process. I, fortunately, make a stable income and can support myself, and we, fortunately, don't have kids. I have to remember that things aren't going to happen in one day. It will all take time. As for the house, unfortunately, his parents did buy it for us, and to be honest, after what I saw, I don't want it. I will try to get reimbursed for my beloved kitchen, otherwise, it can burn for all I care. This has been super draining, but I knew I had to talk to them. I already knew there was no coming back for my husband, and when I checked his messages they were exactly what I thought they would say. I'm sorry. It's not what it looks like. We didn't mean for it to happen. Please come home. I love you. Blah blah blah. Just absolute bull. A small part of me thought maybe I could find it in me to forgive my sister, as we only have each other. But after I opened her messages, all hope was lost. She used the same excuses we heard our father use when he cheated on our mother and beat us. She said the same things our mother would say when she would excuse our dad's behavior and also beat us. I spoke to her this morning and asked her to tell me straight up who, what, where, when, and why. She told me back in July when I went on a girls' trip she was at our house and joked to my husband that I would cheat on him on the girls' trip because that's what always happens. He said nah, and they joked about it, but she said he could get even with me and they ended up doing it once. One time lead to 2 to 3, then to whenever they could do it. There was never any evidence or signs or anything that I was going to or even thinking of cheating. I told her we were done and there is nothing she could do to bring us back together. I later received a call from an unknown number. It was my mother, who I haven't spoken to in 7 years. Turns out my sister has been in contact with her and told her what had happened, and my pos mother, the same woman who beat me for breathing wrong, had the audacity to say this is what I get for taking her daughters away from her. It hurts so much. I know things are going to get messier and this is going to be a long few years. I've now lost all my blood relations. I need to get all my crap and find a new place. I want to show them that I can and I will thrive without them. Again, thank you all from the bottom of my heart for all the love and advice. All the people in the comments that could relate to me, I'm so sorry.
I have been Alabama-style dating my brother. I just found out that I've been dating my biological brother for 6 years. I am 30 and my brother is 32. I'm just going to call him my boyfriend most of the time while I type this. I feel weird about this. I was adopted as a baby, but I didn't know that I was adopted until I was in high school. I didn't feel betrayed or care much. I love my parents, and my parents love me. Who cares if they aren't my real parents? My boyfriend was also adopted, and when we met it was one of the things we sort of bonded over. We both didn't learn we were adopted until high school, and we both were lucky and had good families. We weren't passed around from foster home to foster home. Our relationship was and still is great. We understood each other very fast. We were attracted to each other quickly. I've never met someone and felt immediate attraction and familiarity. Now I know the comfort and familiarity because he's my brother. Not my half-brother. He is my full brother. We've done everything a couple that has been together for 6 years could do. We've said we love each other, we've had intimacy, we've celebrated anniversaries, we've met each other's families. I'm just glad we both agreed early on that we don't want to have kids, so that has never happened. I don't want to deal with the health risks and have to raise a child and them know that their parents are siblings. I discovered it when we did the DNA test to see our ancestry and what we are. I ordered 2 for us, we spit in the tube and sent it out. It took like a month for the results to come back, and I was excited to see what we were, but before I could even get to that, I saw that we were siblings. I was shocked, to say the least. I only just found out this information and I haven't told my boyfriend. I'm really hoping they made a mistake, but things are kind of starting to make sense to me now. We always get the "you guys look so alike" or "he's the male version of you." Long. Before this test we've always gotten compared. We always just laughed it off, but I've spent the morning looking at pictures of us together and realizing that we really do look so alike. It's freaking me out and I don't know what I should do. I still love my boyfriend/brother, and we have been together for 6 years. We have a house together and a whole comfortable life. I'm hoping that this test is wrong and we'll do a real test soon, but I'm panicking. I still see him as the love of my life. I have been Alabama-style dating my brother. We are still together and have been together. Rather than get a real DNA test done by a doctor, we just left it at that. We read that those ancestry tests are pretty accurate, and it was interesting to learn of other relatives we have because Ancestry links you to other people that have taken the test and share your DNA. Something that was questioned a lot was, why would you two randomly both take DNA tests? And we are both adopted. We want to know what we are. Everyone else growing up could say like my family is Irish or my family comes from Germany or my great-great-grandmother used to do this. We have none of that. We privated our ancestry and decided not to get another test because that is just more people involved. I didn't even have to tell him when the news broke. We both had login information to the ancestry, so he saw it himself. It was a lot to get over and talk about. I have to admit it was really hard to look at him in that way for a while. We slept in separate places. For a while I felt weird around him. But we're 6 years in by that time and I still loved him and still do love him. My weirdness was different than how I feel with my actual brothers. I consider the kids of my parents to be my actual brothers. If I were to date one of them I would feel odd because I grew up with them. With my boyfriend/brother it was just a crazy what are the odds feeling. And looking at him and seeing myself and seeing our parents that we never knew. We talked about it and we have decided to just stay together. We don't want kids and no one else knows, so who are we hurting? I don't care about all the comments that call us disgusting. I don't see him as a brother. I don't find the fact that he is my biological brother hot or exciting. I just see him as the man I love. We have been able to joke and find humor about it within ourselves. My boyfriend joked we could have saved money on the ancestry. And just sent one test in. Back when Game of Thrones was really popular before that terrible ending, we went to a Halloween party and I dressed as Cersei. Recently he was like I should have dressed like Jaime. This may seem weird or off-putting to people reading this, but it is how we find levity in it all. Another misconception I kept seeing was that we met in high school. We met when I was 20. We had a really normal relationship. It was from friends to best friends to couple. He is honestly the love of my life. We've been together 7 years now and I've never gotten tired of him. I've never felt like I wanted to be apart from him. Even during the big discovery, I missed sharing a bed with him. I've never felt more at home and comfortable with a person, and it has nothing to do with him being my brother. No one will know. We aren't having children. We still do everything we did as a couple before finding out. I don't see him as my brother. I would actually feel gross if I slept with my real siblings.
I'm always very busy with my work. One day this extremely who's the world's biggest player and is always trying to get a girl to try him. She seemed in a rush. She left the precinct and I thought it was ringing from Bestie. I picked up the phone and hold on to it. I agreed and said that whenever she was ready she could come. He called again. She said that I should come to a certain location. Story. He was very reluctant to come with me, because he wanted to see. When I saw her, she was in a beautiful white dress and she looked absolute. And just as I was leaving, she invited me to stay and chat. Later we were engaged. The only issue was, she had met her family were real estate giants and multimillionaires. Become my future wife, forgot her phone at the precinct where I was working at one year, and ended up getting engaged. The only issue was, her family were real estate giants and multimillionaires. Birthday, and just as things were getting super intense, her doorbell, I nutted just as the denim of my pants brushed my tip. Absolutely no idea what to do. But to make things worse, as my fiancé, whose legs were literally shaking, I'm black, by bending over, put his hand out for me to walk over and shake it. I'd made all over my pants. So I just stood there and sat. But before I could, my biggest enemy walked through the jumped on me and started biting and licking my pants. In front of the out. That night I had at least 40 missed calls from my fiancé or what had happened. Our next encounter was probably the most. Our mutual friends, we decided to have our wedding, and now we have our first encounter.
I gifted my twins differently. Was I wrong to do so? So recently, my son and daughter, who are 18-year-old twins, just celebrated their birthdays, and I got them gifts accordingly. However, my daughter got upset about the gift she received compared to her brothers, and now she won't talk to me. Here's the deal: I bought him a car for my son's birthday. It's a used one, nothing fancy, but it's a reliable vehicle to get him around. On the other hand, for my daughter's birthday, I gifted her a $300 Visa gift card. Now, I understand that, on the surface, this might seem unfair. But hear me out. My son has shown a strong interest in cars for years, and he's been saving up for one. He's responsible and has a part-time job, so it was an excellent time to help him get one. He was thrilled, and we even went car shopping together. On the other hand, my daughter never expressed any particular interest in anything specific. She's more into shopping and fashion, so a Visa gift card would allow her to choose whatever she wants. Plus, she's been asking for extra money lately to buy clothes and makeup. However, when she opened her gift, she got visibly upset and called it unfair. She said it wasn't fair that her brother got a car, and she only got a gift card, and I was showing favoritism. I tried explaining my reasoning, but she wouldn't listen and stormed off. She hasn't talked to me since. I did what was best for them based on their interests and needs, but now I wonder if I was wrong. Am I the a-hole? Edit: many people are saying I'm sexist and showing favoritism. I want to make clear that I'm not a sexist, and I'm not intentionally trying to show favoritism. Although the value of their gifts may differ, I did the best I could to find an estate I thought they'd both enjoy based on their interests. My son was interested in cars, and my daughter was interested in money, so that's what they got. I thought $300 was a good portion, and I didn't believe it had to be the same amount of money I was putting into the purchase of my son's car, as strictly handing out $10K to someone to spend on whatever they want is different from spending it on something that's needed. Edit 2. I might let my daughter share a car with her mother, as my wife doesn't drive or go anywhere that much. So when she isn't using it, my daughter can drive her car for now.
What is the most unreasonable request a parent has asked of you as a classroom teacher? Please give my daughter an assignment that will allow her to pass your class and graduate. We have a busy summer planned and she will be unavailable to attend summer school. This was written in response to an email that I sent to a student's mother. For the purpose of this answer, I will call the student Bella. I had tried several times to contact Bella's mother over the school year. She had never replied to any of my emails, unlike her science teacher, whom had similar difficulties, yet communicated with her regularly. Unfortunately, it took sending Bella's mother an email explaining that her daughter was about to fail my class and not graduate, to get her to pay attention. By that time, it was already too late. Bella had attended my class 36 out of 180 days of the school year, hated history, and was usually at least 5 minutes late whenever she did show up. In class, she was disrespectful, disruptive, and never bothered to lift a finger to do any work. Once I asked her why she was absent, and she shrugged her shoulders and turned her head away from me. Her attendance in other classes was similarly poor, but not as poor as mine, which was her final class of the day. Unfortunately for Bella, I was not a pushover when it came to her grade. However, I acquiesced with her mother's wish that I give her work to take home in order to pass the class. I create workbooks for my class, which correspond to different units. This helps me not only differentiate between different abilities, but it offers flexibility for students in case they get sick, and makes it easier for substitutes to follow whenever I am absent. There are 18 units in my class during the school year, and she had yet to complete one. I decided that in order for Bella to pass, she would need to complete 1/3 of the units, which meant that she would need to do 6 of the already available workbooks. I allowed her to choose which ones she wanted to do, and sent her off with the agreement that they would be completed over the weekend, but privately, I expected her to work on them over the week. As anticipated, Bella didn't show up until the final day of class. Along with the workbooks was a handwritten note from her mother explaining that Bella didn't complete everything because she was busy and that she had tried her best. When I checked the workbooks, I found that she didn't bother to try. She had completed 2 of the easier assignments, both of which were located in only one workbook. That summer, I ended up teaching a credit recovery class for history. As suggested, Bella was in attendance. However, unlike the regular school year, most of the curriculum was online, and if you failed to log in more than 2 days in a row, you were locked out and withdrawn from the course. It took less than a week for Bella to be withdrawn from the class. To my knowledge, she never stepped foot in my school again, or recovered the history credits that she needed to graduate. I am assuming that she was failing some of her other classes, and decided to drop out as a consequence. Poor Bella. As easy as it is to blame her for what had happened, it's very clear that her mother should at the very least receive part of the blame for enabling her behavior. How fragile is trust? An exploration of trust and betrayal. I came across a post that reminded me of my own experience with my twin. We were part of the same circle of friends, but my family wasn't the type to openly share emotions, so I haven't had a chance to talk about this until now. After suffering a traumatic brain injury, I found it difficult to connect with people. Before, I was anxious and afraid of rejection, but now I struggle with apathy. I simply don't care about anything. However, even after my injury, the bond between my twin and me remained strong. Everything changed 4 years ago, a few months before my wedding. I discovered that while I was in the hospital recovering from a car accident that caused my traumatic brain injury, my twin had been involved with my ex-fiancée multiple times. Initially, I tried to justify their betrayal by blaming myself and my accident. But as I reflected more, anger consumed me. I felt foolish for believing that everything after the betrayal was genuine. I questioned whether my partner's presence at doctor appointments and physical therapy sessions was out of love or guilt. Did they say yes to my proposal out of devotion or remorse? Did my twin value me so little that they willingly discarded 2 decades of trust and loyalty? Did they feel any guilt for destroying the future I had envisioned? In that sad moment, I lost the 2 people in the world I cared about the most. After the fallout, I tried to reconnect with my twin, seeking to rebuild our relationship, but they refused to take any accountability. They blamed me for their decision to betray my trust, attributing it to my mental state after the traumatic brain injury. I had been severely depressed following the car accident and had even attempted unaliving before. Amidst the cycle of attempts to heal our bond, I had a moment of clarity. My twin once nonchalantly told me, "Your life was coming together beautifully, and I wanted to be the one to destroy it." Although they laughed it off as a joke, there was truth beneath those words. Every attempt to rebuild the bond ended in fights, leaving me feeling empty. Through self-sabotage, encounters with the law, talk therapy, and EMDR therapy, I eventually had to accept the demise of the relationship with my twin. Now, in the present, my twin's life has crumbled. They lost their well-paying job, their substance habit caused them to lose their friends, and their car was repossessed. They have moved back in with our mother, and I frequently visit her because I don't trust her ability to care for my mentally disabled sister. This, unfortunately, means I have to interact with my twin. We can maintain a cordial relationship, exchanging pleasantries, but when they try to discuss their struggles or have deeper conversations, I make it clear that I am not interested. I have tried to feel sympathy towards them, but I have lost the ability to feel anything anymore. My twin could easily be a stranger to me, and strangely enough, I'm okay with it.
Parents of Reddit, what's something your kids do without realizing it hurts your feelings? When my daughter gets a night terror at night, she will tell me crying that she wished I died instead of mommy. She hasn't done it for a couple of months now, but it hurts more than I can bear. I calm her down and get her back to sleep and usually go to my room and cry. My teenage son came across some old wedding photos that his dad had put away for him at his office. When his stepmom discovered these photos, she became upset, so my son threw them away to avoid the drama. These photos were 24 years old. There are no duplicates and my son doesn't understand why I'm upset that he didn't just bring them to me. My 5-year-old daughter said she wanted a new mommy because I don't have a pretty face. She didn't realize it would be hurtful, I guess. When I drop them off at a party or day camp and I go to say bye, they've already gone off with friends. Kids are getting older now, so it's not cool to kiss or hug daddy goodbye, but man, it stings, and I sure don't want to embarrass them, so I just sadly walk to my car. What small seemingly insignificant decision had a massive impact on your life? Telling my mom to work a sales job at a shitty job and location instead of minimum wage retail when I was a kid. She now makes just short of $400K a year before tax after coming from nothing. Getting my mental health checked. I still struggle, but at least I understand why now and can stop beating myself up for not doing anything for an entire day. Asked a girl at our campus gym if she wanted to come by my place and meet my dog when she was finished. Yeah, no idea why I tried that move. Anyway, she did. Married 20 years. What is the most messed up thing someone admitted to you while drunk? Sitting around shooting the shit with neighbor and he tells me that 15 years prior, he and a buddy accidentally took a man's life over a misunderstanding. They tossed him in their car and drove down some country roads and found a spot to throw him out. Woke up the next day to a backseat full of blood, and had a vague memory of the whole thing, but couldn't remember where they dumped him. He said they lived in fear every day of getting caught, and after about a year his buddy left town never to be heard from again. He said he himself married, had kids, and lived his life, that every year that passed, he felt safer, and more certain they'd gotten away with it. I wasn't sure whether to believe him or not, but a couple of days later, in a really sober moment, he asked if I'd said anything about his story to anyone. I told him no. He very calmly told me that 3 people knew, himself, the buddy who vanished over a decade ago, and me, so if anything came of it, he'd know where it came from. Luckily he went to jail for a DUI, and I moved away.
What's the biggest plot twist you've seen in real life? 1. Was out with a friend of mine who ran into her dad, and his other family. 2. I knew a woman who was going through her proceedings with her husband. He was always argumentative and borderline abusive towards her, certainly always shouting and demeaning. Then, just as the divorce was entering its final stages, he very suddenly passed away. His awkwardness had a massive undiagnosed brain tumor which had been physically altering his personality. His wife felt all kinds of guilt afterwards and took it out on everyone she talked to and lost a lot of friends in the process. 3. During the last year of my grandfather's life he had dementia and was having trouble keeping track of reality. Before he was placed into hospice he kept complaining about a man that was in his house. He would say that he would come around at night and that he was taking his things and using his stuff. Grandma of course kept reassuring him that she was the only one there. His doctor increased his medications because he was losing touch with reality so badly. Fast forward to my grandfather's funeral and a man showed up that wasn't known by more than a few people in the family. Turns out he was an old friend of my grandmother's who showed up to give his support. In a small town like that it wasn't exactly an unusual thing to have random people show up to the funeral home who knew the person at some point. Well, about a year later my grandmother let slip that she is seeing someone. The guy from funeral. At this point nothing too odd, they got to talking in church and we thought it was sweet. Then a bit later sweet innocent old grandma mentions that it's their 3rd anniversary. Grandpa passed 2 years prior. This man was the person that Grandpa saw in his house every night. He was the reason that everyone thought Grandpa was going crazy. He was the reason that my grandfather was medicated to the point of being a vegetable for the last horrible year of his life. 4. My friend in college was such a jock, worked out constantly, total womanizer, had posters of women in swimsuits, also pretty conservative politically. Few years later he's in a relationship with a black guy and also converted to Judaism. They adopted a baby girl from Korea. 5. Little town I grew up in had these 2 car dealerships on opposite sides of town. One Chevy, one Ford. They were bitter rivals. Attack ads, shit-talking salesmen, billboard wars, you name it. When the owner of the Chevy dealership passed, it came out and also owned the Ford dealership by way of a shell company. No one saw that coming, including a lot of the higher-ups who worked at the dealerships. I slept with an old flame during a work trip and my husband has no idea. I met Dee in the 6th grade, science class to be exact. We weren't really friends for the first couple of years of knowing each other. We began talking more around the age of 13-14 and immediately clicked. We had a shared interest for a particular hobby, and once we bonded over that everything else snowballed. We started to develop feelings for each other, but due to my immaturity at the time I never really agreed to officially date. I will spare the details, but unfortunately we had a very painful falling out, and by the time high school came around we were no longer speaking. We did eventually reconnect, but that was followed by several instances of going back and forth between being inseparable to no contact. It was always rooted in Dee's inability to be my friend because he still had romantic feelings for me and it made things difficult for him. Dee moved across the country not long after we graduated high school, and any contact we had going forward was always virtual. We finally got to a point where it seemed like it was possible for us to be just friends. I got into a long-term relationship and Dee was dating other people as well. My long-term relationship turned into a marriage, and I've now been with my husband, M, for a total of 6 years. After a couple of years of being married, feelings for D began to resurface. We would talk and text all the time. There were a lot of flirtatious messages being sent. Several times I found myself wanting to cross the line completely. D and I had never been together intimately, and I found myself longing for that sort of encounter with him more and more. I think we both knew what we were doing was wrong. At that point it was pretty much a case of emotional cheating. So we went no contact again and stayed that way for quite some time. Until recently. I got a new job last year where I've had several opportunities to travel for work. I was recently asked to go to Phoenix for a 2-month assignment. Phoenix is where D lives. I hadn't seen him in 10 years, which feels crazy to put into words. I fought with myself not to reach out, but I couldn't help it in the end. I surprised him by showing up to his job. He owns a small cafe, with a couple of things I had collected over the years that I always wanted to give to him. Understandably, he was in shock to see me standing there in the flesh, and I can say I practically felt the same way seeing him. I couldn't really get a read on how he felt about seeing me after so long, but I gave him the name of my hotel, and told him I'd be in the restaurant at 5 p.m. if he wanted to catch up over dinner. He came and we had such an amazing time chatting, reminiscing, laughing. 2 hours flew by and I didn't want it to end. I asked if he wanted to come hang out in my hotel room for a while. I told myself that it was possible for us to just enjoy each other's company without crossing a boundary, but deep down I wanted to take it a step further. We hung out for a few more hours, drinking and laughing. Eventually we got tired. I laid down to close my eyes for a few seconds and he did the same. We inched closer together until we were basically spooning, and after a few minutes of laying like that I could feel him getting hard. I was so incredibly turned on, I really couldn't resist. I turned around and kissed him, and I'm sure you can guess what happened next. It was honestly the best intercourse of my life. I can't even describe what it felt like having him inside of me for the first time. Everything about it was absolutely perfect, from the pace, to the rhythm, the foreplay, everything. His hands on my body felt like electricity. I never orgasmed like that until I was with D. From then on we saw each other almost daily. We continued to sleep together and each time felt just as good if not better. Of course in the back of my mind I felt tremendous guilt, knowing that I was betraying my husband in the worst way possible. But it just felt too good to stop. Even writing this out now makes me feel a certain way. I got home from my work trip 3 weeks ago and my husband doesn't have a clue as to what went on in Phoenix. I know I should end things with him, but I'm scared to actually do it. I've built a life with him here and I know I'm an absolutely shitty, disgusting person for what I've done. I've already been asked to return to Phoenix for another 2-month assignment beginning in September. I've tried to reason with myself, but in the end I just know I'm not going to be able to resist seeing D again.
Am I the a-hole for telling my sister that attending her play would be inappropriate? My 32F sister, 26F, is an aspiring actress and part of a theater group that performs some edgy, experimental plays. Many of those plays feature extensive nudity of the cast, including the one she's currently on. She offered a pair of tickets for the premiere to me and my husband, 34M, and I made an excuse that we couldn't attend that day. The truth is, the idea of my husband watching my sister, his sister-in-law, naked on stage makes me, and him, uncomfortable. So when she kept offering us tickets for future performances, it came a point when I had to be honest, and I told her I think it's inappropriate for us to attend. She took it as if I was implying that her work is inappropriate. It took me a while to explain to her this is not what I meant. Even so, she says she's proud of the work she's doing and she wanted to share it with us because we mean a lot to her. Now I'm feeling like a huge a-hole. Am I the a-hole? What should I do to fix this? Is there anything I can say to her?
Update: I left a party after a stupid prank, and it tore my family apart. Well, things escalated a lot after I made my last post because I sent it to my parents and other family members after a little while. They were furious with me at first. Some even mocked me, saying things like, "Oh, watch what you say or do around him. He might just post about it on Reddit." But when they actually read the comments on my post when I made them, they became mortified. My brother-in-law did agree to pay for a new chair and gave me the money I asked for. I bought a better folding chair than my last one and resumed going to family functions. But whenever I was there was this air about some of the family members. They looked at me like I'd sucked all the fun out of the room. My parents had stopped thinking the chair thing was funny, and even scolded a kid for taking my seat when I got up to use the bathroom. The only problem is that this kid was my nephew. And he started crying when they made him get up. My brother-in-law came to the boys' rescue, and my nephew ended up blurting out that his daddy told him he could do it. When I was out of the bathroom, there was a big fight about it going on. Several family members, including my sister and brother-in-law, were all yelling that it was just a damn chair and I shouldn't be so butthurt about it. My parents demanded to know why they were so butthurt about not being allowed to screw with me anymore. What was their motivation after doing it for so long? It made no sense and wasn't funny anymore. And that's when I intervened. I told them none of this crap would have ever happened if they hadn't been so intent on messing with me when there really was no point to it. I only started bringing my own chair because I could never find a stable place to sit. And if they still thought they were in the right about the situation, then they were just bullies, plain and simple. And what kind of example is that to be setting for your son? My brother-in-law raged, grabbed my new chair and hurled it through the living room bay window. There was a bit of a pause before he realized what he'd just done, then he took off in his car and left my sister and nephew there. My parents got my sister to call him. and over the phone they threatened to go to the police if he didn't pay for the damages. He yelled a few swears until my sister took the phone back. She said that he can either make things right or she'll divorce him. Well, that did the trick because he came back looking like a kicked puppy with his head hanging low. He apologized to me and my parents without even looking at us, said he'd pay for the new bay window and left again. My sister said he drank himself to sleep that night. My new chair was just fine. It took being hurled through a bay window like a champ. There was hardly a scratch on it. My brother hired a window company to come and replace the window. And they had to measure and order a new one before it could be installed. Until then the window had to be covered with plywood. The family was still divided about the situation for a while. Mainly my brother-in-law's parents, my uncle, and a couple cousins blamed me and called me obnoxious for insisting on bringing my own chair and refusing to let anyone else use it. So I compromised. I said that if I had a good designated seat that no one will try to take away, I'll leave my chair in my car. It took 2 more family barbecues before they finally agreed to this. Since then I've left the chair in my car unless there really wasn't enough seating. And that's only happened once since. The problem is that even though they stopped screwing with me, they were still screwing with each other until things went too far. They still like to take each other's seats, but I guess others were following my example because they put their feet down and demanded it stop. It's been going on for decades, and they've had enough. My brother-in-law stayed out of the fight entirely and hasn't caused any more trouble. But for several family functions a number of people didn't bother to show up. My mother was broken up about it because she loves hosting parties. It took months, but everything more or less normalized again. Without the chair thing going on, some have resorted to other stupid pranks like a little device you hook to a chair that makes farts. They didn't do this to my seat, but did it to a cousin. This cousin got really petty at the next party and let out real farts. He said he ate a whole pack of fiber bars and had eggs for breakfast. It was damn nasty. Other pranks included hiding eating utensils, a stink bomb, hiding some sort of monster thing in the toilet, putting cellophane in a doorway, ripping paper when somebody bends over, messing with drinks, hiding shoes, and finally the one that really infuriated my aunt and uncle when a party was held at their house, a glitter bomb. They got the carpet professionally cleaned and billed the person who made the glitter bomb for it. So now pranks are just over. They don't want any more, and I'm fine with that. But the last few family functions have been a bit dull. Of course, things were only calm for a little while before even more trouble started up. What's a harmless/non-serious secret you've kept forever? When my wife died, she had been working on special occasion letters for all of our kids. Towards the end, the cancer had spread to her brain and she wasn't able to focus on writing much, and when she did, it was often unintelligible gibberish. I tried to help her by taking dictation, but she said it would mean more if it was in her own handwriting and wanted to finish it. She slipped into a coma and died after only getting through a handful of letters for our eldest child, leaving addressed envelopes only for our other 2 kids. I knew this would be devastating for the 3 kids, and possibly create conflict, so I paid a woman who specialized in calligraphy to literally duplicate my wife's handwriting. I gave her the content, channeling my wife's comments she made to me about what I thought would be meaningful words to our 3 kids when I had helped her dictate a few. And, as she wanted, I have passed them out on special occasions of wedding dates, birth of first child dates, first day of college dates, etc. My kids don't know. They've even shared the ones she actually wrote with ones written by her surrogate, and thus far the secret remains safe. I haven't told anyone else this but Reddit and hope it stays here a secret as well. I'll take it to my grave. I consider it harmless as it was her intent, but cancer robs so much from people afflicted with it, including their best, most sincere attempts at helping others cope with the loss themselves.
My awful husband refused to answer my calls while I was in labor because we were fighting. Now he's furious that my brother told him I died in the hospital and demands I cut him off. My husband and I got into a fight a week before my daughter's birth because he casually suggested a paternity test for our daughter when she was born. This came out of the blue and I never expected him to ask that because he's saying he wants to make sure I didn't cheat. I'm a homebody who works remotely with no male friends other than my brother. When I mentioned that I didn't like being accused of cheating, he said he just wanted to be sure. This was the topic of conversation for 3 days straight, which made me stressed and physically ill. I told him I didn't want to talk to him and left for my brother's house. I did something thinking while alone and realized I wanted to work things out, so I tried calling him multiple times throughout the day, but he kept ignoring my calls. A day after that, I went home while he was at work to grab some things, and there, I went into labor. I called him 16 times and didn't get a single reply back. I then called my brother and he drove me to the hospital. He also tried calling my husband half a dozen times, but they got ignored too. It was a horrible and traumatic birth. The baby was too far along and the doctor had to deliver her in the back of my brother's van. I also kept bleeding out, and my sister-in-law, who's a nurse, told me there was a chance I wouldn't have made it. That scared me like hell. I hated all of this. I also had a hysterectomy after all this, which I was fine with because I only wanted 1 kid, but my husband wants a large family. I'm trying to bond with my daughter, but it's been hard. 10 hours after all of this went down, my husband finally responded and asked why I hadn't answered his call. However, my brother had my phone and was so angry that he said, "This is, Ops brother, I'm at the hospital. She didn't make it." Then he turned the phone off. My husband rushed over and started screaming at my brother, asking him why he scared him like that and called him a PP. Security had to force him out and he didn't get to see our daughter until the next day. My sister-in-law thinks the prank was horrible, but says he deserved it. My brother stands by his prank, because he only gave my husband 10 minutes of the same fear he had felt at my side for over 10 hours. Whenever he sees my husband, he keeps telling him that I nearly died because we waited for him. My brother used to be mostly indifferent to my husband, but now he absolutely hates him. You can see it in his face whenever my husband enters the room. He's been visiting a lot because he doesn't trust my husband to care for me while I'm healing. My husband is furious that he won't apologize and that I won't make him. He yelled at me when I said that the only reason my brother had my phone was because he wasn't there. I'm trying my best to sympathize with my husband because I know he feels guilty. However, his mom has been texting me to say that my family is horribly cruel for the prank, and that I should go no contact with my brother. My husband agrees with her, but why would I ghost the only person who was with me for those hellish 10 hours? Not even 2 weeks ago, my husband was accusing me of cheating on him. Now he wants me to get rid of my only support system. It's been hard to be in the same room with my husband, and I've been sleeping in the guest room with my daughter. And this man had the nerve of bringing up paternity again. I just exhaustedly told him to either get out of my face or go stay with his mom if he's planning on stressing me out even more. He went to our room and just locked himself in there. I don't think this will be something we can come back from. I won't be able to heal with him because there is no way he didn't know it was me calling, and he still hasn't told me why he didn't answer. I actually don't want to. Forget how terrible it was waiting on him, thinking he couldn't possibly leave me like that no matter how angry he was. I wouldn't want my daughter to think it's okay to stay with a man who destroyed her trust that way either. I will be contacting an attorney, and will be filing for divorce. My fiancé's ex died and my relationship is in shambles. My fiancé and I had a hard boundary against exes in the relationship and we both agreed that no pictures, no contact, no stories, nothing. Prior to meeting me, he was in a serious relationship for about the same time as us. However, his ex one day told him she no longer loves him and they broke up. He was heartbroken and it took him months to heal. Since his ex was blocked, her mom contacted my fiancé and told him she had cancer and wanted to meet him one last time. This was a difficult decision considering my boundaries, but I felt really sorry this girl was losing her life so young, so I supported my fiancé's decision to see her, but on the condition I'll be in the same room as them. Apparently, she had developed skin cancer and the doctor had drawn up a prognosis for her a few months before they broke up. The ex told both of us that she wanted him to lead a happy life with a woman who could share a life with him, and wished us well. That's why she lied about not loving him anymore, and that she always loved him all this time. She recently died 3 weeks ago and my fiancé is a mess. I can't unsee the way they both held each other's hands, and the look of nostalgia and love in his eyes for her, as I was looking on, feeling like an outsider. It's so difficult and hurtful to see him cry about another woman who he once loved. I literally can't unhear things he said to his mom in the kitchen one day. I wonder what life could have been like with her. We could have been a happy family of our own. She wanted kids with me, we could have named her Rose like she wanted. Where does this leave me? Why am I in his life still if he'd rather be with someone else? I promised myself that I'll only ever be with a guy for whom I am his one and only and first priority. I saw that in him before, but now I don't know. Trust me, I am not a heartless person and I would rather not put myself in any position where I'll consider myself a monster. But this feels incredibly complicated and extremely hurtful to feel like a third wheel in my once happy, thriving relationship. He has been reaching out to me for support and I lend a listening ear, and he has been telling me so many stories from his time with her, and I didn't like one bit of this. My therapist told me while having empathy is important, I shouldn't have to lose myself in my relationship even if circumstances are hard. 2 days ago, he received a package in the mail and it was from the ex's sister. Apparently it was a photo album from their old times that the ex wanted him to have. My fiancé held it so gently and teared up a little. And I literally broke down on the floor crying, having a panic attack. I think I almost unloaded all of what I've been feeling, the third wheel, the unfairness of the whole situation based on what my boundaries around exes had been, my anger at the ex for inserting herself in our lives for no good reason when both of us were literally so happy with how things were panning out regarding our wedding, questioning where his loyalties lied, and I think I did it in one of the most hurtful ways. I told him that we need to pause our wedding plans for now and wanted a week or 2 off to think about our relationship. I'm at my sister's place and haven't been able to sleep or eat properly ever since. It's almost as if I'm falling out of love with my fiancé and he has been calling me and texting me nonstop. I feel so guilty right now. He had suicidal tendencies years ago and I am afraid I might trigger that. He says his ex already died and it's gonna break him if I leave him too. If I left him too? Emphasis on the two. I'm just done. What the heck am I supposed to do?
I can't help but resent the fact that I was born in a third world country. I had a ST upbringing, but fairly good education. I work now and making more than the minimum wage, but I can barely support myself still. I feel so paralyzed and can't help being envious of people living in first world countries who somehow have it easier. And please, before you comment saying that your first world country has many disadvantages, please don't. I know every country has its cons, but at least acknowledge your privilege. I can't walk down the streets without being anxious that someone will try to come at me, mug/harass me verbally or even physically, and I can't even stand my ground because it might be dangerous. And if I sued him, the blame will be put on me. As a woman my age recently was slaughtered by her neck in public on her way to university because she rejected a guy. The court still didn't sentence this guy. Probably never will, as they're looking for excuses that the girl is not an average Muslim given she wasn't a hijabi. Lots of ST just happens every single day and I'm just angry at the world. I live in a Muslim country, I don't share the same beliefs as I'm irreligious, and I can't even be vocal about it because I can be in danger, I might even get killed. My passport doesn't really have any value, traveling with passport like mine is very difficult. I've been looking at master's programs but they're all expensive as FK, even though the most affordable universities you see on those articles surfing the web are not even affordable to me. For some reason the tuition fees for international students in most universities is like double. I'm getting very depressed and I don't want to give up because I do think I might have potential, but even F-King therapy is extremely expensive. An average cost of a session is like at least 50% of the minimum wage you get per month, apparently because taking care of your mental health is luxurious. I just feel bitter and that is hindering my eagerness to learn things and be willing to improve, because no matter how hard you try here, it doesn't F-King matter because of nepotism and corruption. I feel stuck. Who is the most hated person in your workplace and why? Tim was the guy everybody hated. He was lucky we all felt bad for his quirks. Every working day Tim punched in exactly at 8 a.m. and out at 5 p.m. In between those hours you were lucky if you saw him working. It was because of him we no longer had Secret Santa during the holidays, catered monthly lunches, or holiday bonuses. Secret Santa Tim was quite frugal, and when I say quite, I mean he was cheap as F. Every employee in the company voted the dollar amount they wanted to spend on another for the Secret Santa. The average dollar amount came out to $50. Tim's vote was $1. I recognized his shitty handwriting. Everyone, including Tim, agreed to spend around the dollar amount. When it came down to opening presents, it was clear everybody went over that amount. Tim received a pair of tickets to a Dodgers baseball game plus some Dodgers t-shirts, and a hat. The tickets were face valued at $175 each, as Secret Santa had season tickets and gifted him a pair from his set. When it came down for Tim to give his gift, I wondered who he gotten. He got his desk buddy. Jessie was the sweetest girl in the office. She worked with everyone and was the most polite, respectful, soft-spoken human I've ever met. When she opened her gift, I wanted to die. He got her lingerie. Not just any lingerie, crotchless, matching bra and without any tags. Jessie was 5 feet 9 inches and athletic. Whoever those clothes were for was someone athletically challenged. HR had a heyday with that one. Catered lunch the last Friday of every month featured catered lunch within short work day. It always revolved so that things never felt redundant: Mexican, Italian, barbecue, pizza or Chinese. Tim religiously ate Mexican food. When the chosen Mexican restaurant was catering, Tim was first in line to eat. He would wait around the time clock near the patio door so that when 1 p.m. hit, his hand was being scanned with 1 foot out the door. When it was any of the other catered meals, he made it known that he was irritated that so-and-so were catering. May 2013 I got to choose what we were having and I chose Italian since my birthday was the following day. Tim was seriously pissed about having Italian food. Mind you, for the next 2 months the choices were Italian or Chinese, so Mexican was nowhere near the table. Eventually everyone heard a bit of his ramblings and then it hit the ears of the company chairman. They called the heads of every department in and asked about Tim's feeling and how long this had gone on for. I explained how Tim was a quirky guy, but for some reason only liked Mexican food. Next morning there was an announcement that we were no longer having company lunches. This meant no more going home at 2 p.m., and no more lunch for the office. Everyone was pissed. Holiday bonuses, this is what got the ball rolling for Tim's demise. Our company manufactured steel products and shipped them to different distribution warehouses. Nobody in our office worked in sales, so nobody had commission-based pay. Every year before our 2-week holiday vacation we received our last checks for the year and a bonus. The bonus was a percentage of the profits divided up between all employees. It was great. Who doesn't like more money right before the holiday season? Tim, that's who. This particular year had been a bad one for us. Profits were down 10% due to one of our distributors filing bankruptcy. So our bonuses were not as big as before, but they still equated to a paycheck's value. Everyone, other than Tim, was ecstatic they were still receiving bonuses. When Tim opened his check, hell broke loose. I've never seen someone so pissed about a bonus check in my life. First he goes around asking everyone how much they received. We all received the same amount, but nobody wanted to show him their check. Then he tries to talk to his desk mates about receiving less than last year, and this is where it goes downhill. Everyone he asks tells him they received more than last year's amount. You can see where this is going now. After everyone's gone for the day and a few of us stay to clean up the holiday party mess, Tim rushes the company owner and lays it into him on why he received a lower bonus, that he feels undervalued, he should be asking for a raise. We can hear him yell through a closed window to the outside. The holidays pass and Tim is as happy as ever. All department heads get called into what seemed like a normal Monday after the holidays meeting and we're told the yearly bonus structure will no longer continue at our branch. Everybody knew why. A month later Jessie finally got him fired after bringing light to several sexual harassment instances revolving around Tim. What is the funniest joke you've been told that you still think about to this day? It's a monologue from my grandfather. We used to travel north up the A1 to Leeds to stay with my grandparents in their 2 up and 2 down, back-to-back terrace house in cobbled street near the city center. I was around 10 and would sit with Granddad in the downstairs kitchen whilst the others were upstairs. Granddad would puff on his pipe and tell family stories. My favorite was about Uncle Bertram, and the story went something like this. Uncle Bertram was a miner in Skipton Colliery. One day he got caught in a rockfall, which crushed both his legs. With no NHS in those days, and false limbs not being as fancy, Bertram mates all chipped in and persuaded the pit joiner to make a pair out of pit props. Lovely were all polished and varnished with a couple of wooden boot stretchers screwed on the end for feet. Bertram was soon up and about and given a job in the office. He was right proud of his new legs, although they made him a little shorter by a couple of inches. No problem, he just made the turn-ups on his trousers wider to compensate. One day he was sitting just outside the village on a study stone wall, contemplating whether to extend his pigeon loft, puffing gently on his pipe when a gust of wind blew the pipe out. Taking out his swan vest as he struck a match, putting it to his pipe and puffed away until it relit, then threw the burning match away. The wind caught it and it went straight into his extended turnips. Before he could react, his crossed wooden legs caught fire from his burning trousers and he was burnt to the ground. The villagers called the local Bobby, who turned up straight away. Uncle Bertram was arrested. Why, Granddad, the Bobby said it was arson, and Bertram had to appear before the local magistrate the following morning. He pleaded guilty, of course, but why? 'Cause he knew he hadn't got a leg to stand on. Told me 65 years ago, and it still makes me laugh. Former homeless people, what is the nicest thing someone ever did for you? I was homeless as a teenager and used to hitchhike around the country. I was hiking from Wisconsin to New Orleans. I was 15 and pregnant, although I didn't know it at the time. I was sick and throwing up and was trying to get back to New Orleans to go to the charity hospital. I was having a terrible journey. A guy tried to grab my leg and I resisted, and he dropped me off on a toll road where no one would pick me up, so I spent several days walking until a semi-truck driver finally gave me a lift. He was a nice old man and I told him up front that I was 15 and he promised he wouldn't try to hurt me. He told me I reminded him of his niece and would give me a ride as far as he could go. I spent a few hours riding with him and then he pulled off the road at a rest area and asked me if I needed to use the restroom. I did, and I was stupid enough to leave my backpack in his truck when I went in to use it. When I came out, he had thrown my backpack out into the parking lot and left me there, and there were bums going through my bag stealing my stuff. I was tired, hungry, and now I had just been robbed of what little possessions I had. Only a few items of clothing remained. I walked down the highway again and a short time later a car pulled over to give me a lift. The man inside was very overweight, sweaty, smelly, and was wearing just a t-shirt and dolphin shorts. The only reason I accepted the ride was because he had a CB radio in his car, and I thought I could use it to call ahead for another ride. Joke was on me. Once we got down the road he told me the CB didn't work, and now I was stuck in the car with this creepy guy. Luckily, he said he could only give me a lift to the other side of St. Louis. It only took a few minutes before his hand started sliding up my leg. I told him no and he immediately withdrew his hand and apologized. He said he would take me a bit farther to make up for it. A few minutes later, here comes the hand again. I asked him to let me out. He apologized again, and said he'd take me further. He started to pull off onto an exit. Me, can I get out here? Guy, no, there's a place I want to show you. I looked over and there's a sign for a lake up the exit, and I instantly pictured myself tied to a rock at the bottom of a lake. As soon as he got to the end of the exit ramp where it meets the off-road, I opened my door, grabbed my bag, and tried to jump out. He grabbed my necklace and shirt and pulled me back inside and started choking me with it. I was punching him as hard as I could, and I got a good one right in his nose. He loosened his grip enough for me to pull free, and I ran across the off-road and back onto the entrance to the highway. First he yelled, "Get back here, you stupid B-word," and tried to run after me, but he was too fat and I was too far ahead, so he tried to hit me with his car. I jumped over the little rail that runs along the ditch, and I guess he didn't want to damage his car, so he kept going and got back on the highway. Now I'm absolutely terrified that he's going to turn around at the next exit and come back for me, so I'm frantically waving down cars on the highway. My neck is swelling and it's hard to breathe. My shirt is torn open. I haven't showered or eaten in 3 days. I'm crying. I'm sick. I'm a mess. And just to make things worse, it starts to rain. But then, a car pulls over. A cop car. Thanks to the gods, I'm saved. I don't even care if I go to jail. At least there will be food there. The officer opens the front door and tells me to get in. It was a lady in a brown uniform, not sure if she's sheriff, police, park ranger, I have no clue. I'm just happy to be getting away from that psycho. I tell her the whole story while she's driving down the highway. She says she'll make sure I'm safe. She takes me to a gas station and gives me $10 to buy some sandwiches. Then she tells me it's going to get dark soon, and she can't just leave an underage girl out on the highway at night, so she's going to take me somewhere where I can get some sleep. She takes me to her house and lets me take a shower, and while I was in there she washed my clothes for me. After that, she drove me to a Sonic and bought me some dinner. We went back to her house and she let me sleep on her couch. It was around 4 a.m. when she woke me up again. Now there's a man there, and my first thought is, oh crap, what have I gotten myself into now? She introduces the man as her brother, and they tell me that they don't want me hitchhiking tomorrow, so they bought me a bus ticket to New Orleans while I was asleep. They drove me to the bus station and her brother gifted me a huge Bowie knife and said, next time someone tries to hurt you, you use this. And they sent me on my way. I've never been able to repay this woman, but I hope my story reaches her and she knows that she saved my life that day. I made it to charity hospital and found out I was pregnant, and returned to my family to raise my daughter. My twin sister told me to end my own life and my mom smirked when I cried. I just need to vent about this because I am incredibly depressed, and I feel alone. I went to North Carolina for my family when I first left for college at 18. It lasted 2 years, and then it eventually went low contact because I felt guilty about not talking to them. My mom was extremely abusive. She would strangle us, punch us in our backs, etc. You know how it goes. She never physically abused us when our dad was around. Still, the verbal abuse was enough to make him consider leaving her. Because of this, I have severe depression and PTSD and had to go on medical leave from college. My mom begged me to come home for around 2 months before I gave in. I missed having a family, and I am so stupid for being weak and giving in. Since I've been back, my mom has been doing weird things. She wants me to get intoxicated with her, but I can't drink alcohol because I'm on Celexa. She'll give me the silent treatment for a few days when I refuse to drink. I'm always getting the silent treatment, and it hurts. Today my mom asked me if I wanted to live here and not return to school. That made no sense. Why would I not want to complete my education? Also, I wouldn't say I like the constant silent treatments, so I don't like being here. I told her that I'd rather go back to school. She started yelling about how I could go to the community college here. She started crying about how I didn't love her, and my dad told her to stop being dramatic. My sister came in and asked what happened. When my mom told her, she said nothing and just went on her laptop. My twin sister is beyond crazy. She stalked a man for 6 months because the guy told him she didn't know what she was talking about and should shut up. She found this guy's identity from a few Reddit comments and started physically mailing him things with death threats. She signed his Reddit username to everything. I wouldn't have come here if I knew she had done this. My sister then sent me a PM on Reddit that said, "You dumb beach. I hate you so much. You're a piece of trash, and I'm glad you were roped. No one loves you, and no one ever will, and how effing dare you make my mom upset. She has been kind to you, all she wanted was for you to stay here. You're never going to be anything, and I know you've been suicidal, so why stop feeling that way and just go end yourself? No one will care. Your boyfriend broke up with you last year, and I think that goes to show that no one cares about you. I hope you get roped again, but I should stop talking before you call the cops on me like you used to do to mom when we were kids. There's so much I'd love to say to you, but I don't want you to go squealing, and I don't want to be a bully." As soon as I saw that, I started crying and told my dad. He said my sister was out of line, but he couldn't discipline her, and if that's how she feels, she is entitled to feel that way. My mom came in and saw me crying and started laughing uncontrollably. I asked my sister why she would do something like this when I was only nice. I sent her like $400 a month when I was in school because my parents were poor. I deleted my account immediately, and my sister said that she found my account because she put a tracker on my laptop. My dad only said that it wasn't nice. I have no idea how to cope with this. My cousin said I can move in with them next month when they return to the country, but that's such a long time away. Update, my hands are shaking, but I am heading to a domestic violence shelter. I am terrified. The family who would take me and said my mom asked them not to get involved, and they didn't want to make her mad. She didn't even have to know I was there. My entire family has known about the abuse, and they tell me it's awful but have never done anything. I look like a mess because it all happened fast. An object was thrown at me, and nasty things were said. My life was threatened. I didn't even have time to shower yet. I am at the getting my medicine. The domestic violence shelter is paying for it. I fear getting judged because I rolled out of bed and looked awful. But I had to escape. The shelter only gives me 30 days, so at my job interview, I think I'll be honest and tell them I really need the job because I'm in a shelter. It's at a cinema, so that would be nice. My friend and her parents lived in my college town and said I could stay there. I have to buy my ticket. Thanks for the encouragement, and I hope things will be okay for me. Edit, my dad keeps sending me texts telling me to call him immediately. I am not going to do that. Empty everything from my bag? You got it. Had overzealous security checkpoints like this at a big-name computer manufacturer. They were paranoid about people trying to steal computers and parts. We were required to empty everything out of our bags, and pockets too. They would confiscate anything, even stuff obviously marked with a different vendor's name. They would take and scan all CDs and DVDs to make sure they didn't contain copies of proprietary software. My group received and tested a lot of CD and DVD drives. Some of them came with clear plastic discs inside, shaped like a CD or DVD, as packaging to protect moving parts during shipment. We removed and discarded them before testing. One of my coworkers was responsible for setting up LAN profiles on equipment, and had a couple CDs clearly marked from a well-known LAN equipment manufacturer, not the computer manufacturer, that he used to do his job. Despite allowing those to go through several times, one day security decided to confiscate them to scan them. They could not do this quickly, they didn't know what they were doing, so they made him leave the discs, told him he could pick them up the next day. But since they were incompetent, they ended up keeping his discs for several days, preventing him from doing his job, until finally they got a competent tech to verify that there was no company proprietary software on them. My coworker decided to repay their favor. He stuck several of those clear plastic discs in his bag, and yep, security thought they were CDs and confiscated them. Of course they couldn't read anything on those discs, so they told him to leave them, pick them up tomorrow. They struggled with those discs for several days before finally getting that competent tech to come and verify that there was no data on them. My coworker declined to take the discs back when security finally offered them. Asked them if they were truly sure there wasn't company data, because maybe it is well hidden. They decided to try to scan them again. For several days, my students used sign language during class. I found out something horrific. So I talked with Jane, her psychiatrist, and someone else from school. I talked with them alone before we talked with Jane so they would understand the situation better. Jane's psychiatrist was the one to talk the most because I wasn't sure what to say, but when Jane's psychiatrist Maya asked why Jane did all of this, Jane started crying and didn't want to talk anymore. Maya wanted me to leave because she believed Jane didn't want to talk because I was there, so I left. A little bit later, Maya called me. She wanted me to come and talk about what happened and what Jane told her. Like a lot of you already thought, Jane had a rough time at home and was indeed being abused, not physically by her parents but emotionally. Her parents constantly favored her younger sisters over her and, in Jane's words, didn't care about her. Her older sister would regularly bring multiple boys home while babysitting Jane and her sisters, which is probably one of the things Jane learned about lovemaking stuff. A lot of you all in the comments thought Jane was being inappropriately hurt at home, but that's not what is going on. Jane told Maya that her other classmate, Luca, who is 2 years older due to having to repeat a year, intimately abuses Jane. Jane says that Luca claims that this is what love is, and that's why Jane thought it was okay to say those things about me because she loves me. Jane explained to Maya that she didn't mean it like that and wouldn't want to hurt me. Jane felt she was in love with me and told this to her friends. They taught her that what she said, like stalking me and potentially breaking into my house, is part of being in love, and that's why she did it. I saw another comment saying that Jane acts like this toward me because I'm one of the few nice people in her life. I'm not sure. Jane did not say anything that would prove that, although I think that's probably what's going on, and that's why she thinks she's in love with me. I can't think of any other reason why a 12-year-old would like me. This is all I know now. If everything Jane says is true, I hope she gets some help and possibly a new home. I was in prison for 15 years. There was a skinwalker in there with us. It all started with a prison legend. Supposedly, years ago something awful and unexplainable happened in the prison. Every morning we'd be woken up and expected to stand near the front of our cells while guards visually confirmed we were present and accounted for. Apparently about a year before I got sent there, the most brutal and unexplainable thing happened during one of these routines. A man who had a cell to himself looked very off during this check. When a guard pulled over another guard to help him check it out, they found it wasn't actually the prisoner they were expecting at all. It was a totally different man. This man was wearing the skin of the other man over him. Loosely fitting, draped over him, apparently looked like a real monster. The scariest things were though, was the guy wearing the skin was not an inmate. They had no idea how he even got into prison, let alone a cell. What's worse is that they couldn't even figure out who the hell he was. He wasn't documented anywhere. And what's worse than that? They never even found the body of the man of the skin he was wearing. Pretty grisly stuff, I know. And I realize that's not the go-to definition of a skinwalker, but that's what the prison called him. The skinwalker. Didn't help that the guy never talked apparently. Anyway, that's what started the whole skinwalker superstition around the yard. Apparently the guy got shipped to a different spot about a month after it happened, and just about everyone in Gen Pop felt all the better for it. I heard about the story on the second day of my stay. Hell of a story to hear to place in your home for the foreseeable future. Now onto the real shit though. Sure, that guy was the skinwalker, but all he did in the long run was get an old lifer Navajo inmate to tell everyone about actual skinwalkers. It seemed like a lot of the prison culture actually revolved around them. Now, apparently, skinwalkers are tricky to point out on the spot, but if you manage to survive around one for more than a minute or two, almost everyone can tell the mannerisms are all off. They can mimic human speech but not replicate it. They twitch manically. They have an unnatural gait while walking. But apparently they got better with experience. The old Navajo guy, his name was Carl, said that he was sure there was an actual one among the prisoners. Slowly picking us off over the years. He called it the Grandmaster Skinwalker at one point. Apparently he thought it had human mannerisms down so well that you might not even be able to tell if it was your cellmate for a day or two. It had to be good, he posited one night. He would expect a skinwalker to jump at any opportunity for a kill. But this one realized it had a revolving door of people to kill coming to it, and masterfully bided its time, as Carl thought, for years. A lot of guys found humor in it. A lot more were really on edge about it. Every once in a while in prison, people snap. Sometimes you'll find your cellmate swinging in front of your bunk, strung up around the neck by his pant leg. Sometimes you just can't take it anymore. But in our yard, people tended to snap in a very special way. It wouldn't be an outburst at dinner, or a silent suicide in the night. Guys would just stop talking. Hunch over and shuffle around. Any friendships they had would be mostly out the window. They would turn into a loner during rec time. They would let their hair hang in front of their face. No one liked to talk about it. Like if they did, it would happen to them next. I felt the same way. I didn't know if it was a skinwalker, or just people going crazy. But I didn't want to find out. It wasn't clockwork or anything, but every time someone snapped in this way, it wasn't more than a couple weeks before they were shipped off or transferred to God knows where without anyone else knowing beforehand. Then there was the nighttime occurrences. Short, loud bursts of sound echoed through my cell block during all hours of the night on a regular basis. It sounded like a mix between a pig's dying squeals and nails on a chalkboard. Just another thing no one liked to talk about. Even scarier were the shadows and footsteps. The block was dimly illuminated in the night by a few lights hanging from the ceiling outside the cells. I myself saw shadows flit across my walls on a regular occasion, when there were definitely no guards near my cell. One time near the end of my sentence, I woke up, looked at my back wall and found a perfect silhouette of a person standing there, but when I looked, my bunkmate was asleep, and no one was outside my cell. And the footsteps. Everyone hated the fucking footsteps. They were the scariest part. In the night, sometimes, more rarely than the shadows, you would hear ungodly fast footsteps. They sounded like wet feet slapping on tile floor. Whatever caused them would fly from one end of the block to the other in a dead sprint. Whatever it was inhumanely fast. If you happened to be awake before it started, by the time you heard the footsteps on one side of your cell and whipped your head around to see the thing run by, it sounded like it was 3 cells past you. Everyone hated the footsteps. I agreed. I thought they were the worst. I was released from that place about a month ago, and I have more stories than I can count. I swear it was nearly my turn. About a week before I was discharged, my cellmate, and a good friend of mine snapped. In the same kind of way. I didn't sleep for an entire week. Well, I did sleep of course, but never for more than a few minutes at a time. Never turned my back on the guy. The scariest thing? I woke up one night to him somehow snaking his body through the bars of our cell. For reference, I couldn't get anything past my shoulder through them. The worst part though, he was coming back into our cell. On the day of my release I didn't say a word to him. Just left. He seemed fine with it, so was I. I had made it through 15 years of prison fights, gang disputes, and for all I know, skinwalker abductions. I left through the front gates, a free man. As I walked along the fence for the rec yard, I spotted my cellmate, standing off on his own, like he had for the last week or so. I shook my head, not even really sure if it was him anymore. I took one last look over the yard, this time from the other side of the fence. I wish I hadn't. There, standing off on his own, on the other side of the yard, was Carl. Slouched over, eyeing the other inmates, and twitching manically. What's the stupidest thing someone has argued with you about? 1. I watched a couple break up over whether or not a chicken could be a pet. They got into this extremely heated argument which led to them hitting each other. Eventually, both of them turned to me and asked for my opinion. I said, why couldn't a chicken be a pet? I've seen videos of people having chickens as pets. The girl got pissed off at my answer and had to go have a cigarette to calm down. After that she refused to talk to me because I sided with him. Volatile. 2. I work at student loans, and if you have a child under 18 and your household income is under a certain amount, you're eligible to receive a grant to help with childcare. A woman comes in and I tell her with her income she can receive said grant. She says she doesn't want it. I tell her it's a grant that she'll never have to pay back. Unlike her tuition fee and maintenance loan, she doesn't want it as her child is 13 and she can handle it herself. I say I understand, but explain. It is offered to everybody in the threshold. So it's basically free money to help people with children. She doesn't want it. In the end, I asked her if I offered her $2,000, which she would never have to pay back if she could prove her child is dependent on her. Would she take it? She said yes. Obviously, I say that's what the childcare grant is. She still doesn't want it. 3. I told a coworker that I was taking a class in archaeology and was pretty interested in majoring in it. He insisted archaeologists dug up dinosaurs. I explained, no, that's a really common mistake. Paleontologists dig up dinosaurs. Archaeologists deal with human stuff. Dude got really defensive and doubled down, quizzing me on random dinosaur facts that he probably didn't know either, and said I would never make it as an archaeologist if I didn't know those things. His final statement was, well, what if you're digging up a building and you find a dinosaur skull? Huh? What are you going to do then? Before walking out like, dude, you would call someone else who knows about said dinosaur. Also, if I'm digging up a building and a effing fossil from the Mesozoic era is there, we've dug too deep. Dude, just couldn't accept he had made a mistake. 4. My father in his 80s had a heart attack and fell over in the snow. He broke his ankle and so was in the hospital for an extended period. My mother could not be convinced that he did not do this on purpose to get out of a vacation that he wasn't too keen on. He had a effing heart attack. You can't just decide to have one just to get out of something. My wife told me someone else is her soulmate. My wife, Em, met her best friend, Chuck, in high school. They became close friends and Chuck came out to Em as gay. Em was supportive. A year or so later Chuck came out to his parents. They disowned him and kicked him out, and Chuck ended up living with Em and her parents for the rest of high school. Em and I started dating after college and she told me all about Chuck and how close they were and how he was like a brother. I met Chuck and we got along and became friends. Chuck is a good guy. At the time Chuck was dating a guy, they ended up moving in together about the same time that Em and I got engaged. Em and I have been married for 5 years now. I'm a project manager and took on a year-long project in another city. I have to leave at 5:30 a.m. every morning and get home around 6:30 p.m. and I had a long talk about my job before I took on this project. We knew it would be a sacrifice for me to be working so much, but I'm getting more money than I ever thought I would. After this project we can pay off our student debt and start trying to have a baby. We both agreed the money was worth it, since it's only a year. That year will be up in late November. In March Chuck caught his boyfriend cheating. He was devastated. Em immediately told him he could move in with us. I was fine with him moving in, but not happy that Em didn't even discuss it with me first. Chuck was pretty broken up and Em was giving him lots of love and attention. I was fine with it, because I know how much she loves Chuck and he did need her. I also did my best to support him and make him feel loved. For a while this was fine, but as time went on Em has continued to pour all of her attention into Chuck. Sometimes I get home from work and neither of them are there, and I found out they went to a movie or out to dinner together. I don't think there is anything romantic or sexual between them, but it has been annoying that I get left out of all the plans. The past few weeks several things have happened. The three of us went to a party and someone joked about Chuck being our third wheel and Em said Chuck is not the third wheel. I said what? And she said I've known Chuck longer than I've known you. A week or so after that Em and Chuck went out dancing one night. I had to work the next day so I stayed home. I woke up at about 3 a.m. and Em was not in bed. I went and found her and Chuck cuddled up on the couch asleep with the TV on. Both of those things made me uncomfortable. I also realized I had been working so much I was just sort of letting Em and Chuck plan everything, and I had not planned a date night in a while. I decided I needed to be more active and so I planned a date night for last Friday. When I first told Em she was excited, as we have not been on a date just the two of us in a while. Friday I got home at 6:30 and Em and Chuck were not there. I took a shower and got ready. About 7:15 I finally called Em, as we had reservations at 8. She answered and when I asked where she was she said her and Chuck had gone shopping and were getting some dinner. I was kind of stunned and asked about our date. She laughed and said oh I forgot. Oh well. And that was that. She didn't even invite me to join them. So, a point I should make here, My dad was very controlling of my mom and had an anger problem where he would yell and throw things. He never threw things at us, but it was still scary as a kid. I have worked very hard to not be like him. I've tried to never be controlling of Em or tell her what to do. I also tend to shut down when I get angry. When Em forgot our date I was mad, so I didn't say anything right then, but I knew I needed to address how I was feeling. So later that evening I told her we needed to talk. I had written down some things so I could stay focused. I started by saying that I loved Chuck and he was always welcome in our home, but that I felt like our marriage was suffering and we needed to work on us. Em blew up. She thought I was attacking Chuck. I guess I didn't word things well, and she started defending him and attacking me. We have never had a big fight before, we always talk and work things out. I was stunned that she was attacking me. She said some awful things. Then she said Chuck is my soulmate and you just have to get used to that. I just shut down. I didn't even know how to process that. I love Em more than anything in the world, but in that moment I realized she loves Chuck more than she loves me. I thought Em and I were soulmates, but to hear her say she considers someone else her soulmate has been devastating. I don't remember the rest of the talk. She huffed off after a while and slept on the couch. Her and Chuck left together on Saturday and were gone most of the day. When they got back she acting like nothing had happened. On Sunday she even made a small joke and batted her eyes at me, something she does when she's flirting with me. Normally I love it, but this time it just made me sick. I told her this was a busy week at work and I was just going to stay at a hotel near the job site, something I've done a few times before, so I haven't seen her since Sunday night. I don't know what to do. Typing all of this up has made me realize I am really burned out with all of this travel. Maybe I checked out too much and haven't given her enough attention. But how do I move forward knowing she will never love me as much as I love her?
I deeply regret having my child and wish she was never born. I'm sure that makes me seem like a monster. It all started off with being groomed by a man I worked with who was much older than me. I had daddy issues and was extremely naive. I was 20, and had very little life experience. I come from poverty, and he showered me with gifts, new outfits, cooked dinners, and then let me move into his big, beautiful house almost immediately. It seemed like a dream come true. Every day of our relationship he would bring up how romantic and fun it would be to have a baby together. At first I told him no, I'm too young. But he would show me cute videos of babies, show me baby clothes in the store, and explain that we could set up the nursery in the sunroom connected to the huge master bedroom. He would bring up the 2 other pregnant girls I worked with and how lucky they are. And 3 months in, I caved. Immediately after I became officially pregnant, he told me that his beautiful house is being foreclosed because he hasn't made a payment in over a year. He said we would have to find a rental, but we'd have to put everything under my name because he owed every utility company there is. Then, after we moved, he consistently didn't help with rent or bills because I have to pay so much in child support to my ex-wife, because she's greedy. Over the next 3 years he lied constantly, flirted with other girls in front of me and on his social media accounts. He would brag about all the girls that would hit on him at work because he knew how insecure I was. Treated me like an inferior in every way. Was very controlling and wouldn't let me do certain things. During the whole thing, he gaslit me into thinking I was crazy for thinking any of these things about him. I hated him, but I was so terrified of being a single mom that it took me 3 years to leave him. The minute I left him he stopped caring about our child. He refused to help pay for any of her expenses such as daycare, $500 a month. He refused to pick her up or drop her off anywhere or to take her to any of her medical appointments. A few months later, he started dating a girl from work who was 2 years younger than me, and he got her pregnant 1 month in. Now, due to the abandonment by her father, my child developed RAD, reactive detachment disorder. If you don't know what that is, just look it up. It's life-shattering. She has also been diagnosed with ODD and ADHD, and we are currently waiting for our appointment to get her evaluated for autism. She has physically and emotionally abused me for as long as she physically and mentally could. None of the kids liked her at daycare because she was so mean, and it never got better from there. She is now 9 and one of the most heartless people I have ever known. She shows no signs of empathy or genuine remorse. She wants what she wants, and if you are in her way, she will do anything to get you out of her way. She once beat me with any object she could find for 6 hours straight because I was between her and the door while she was trying to run away. We were staying with relatives on an island in Maine and there was no police presence to help me. I was covered in bruises. She has been seen hurting animals, stomping on our cat's tail, pushing our puppy off the porch, yelling at them for no reason, with again, zero remorse or regret. She has strangled another child who was supposedly her best friend. She is as mean as they come, such as walking up to my mom and saying, "Grandma, you're ugly," to my mom who is incredibly insecure about how she looks. She is incredibly immature and is constantly having screaming fits of rage. She acts like the most spoiled brat in the entire world, even though we have always been poor and could never, nor ever wanted to spoil her. Because she is so highly horrible to be around, nobody will watch her to give us a break. So me and my now husband feel like prisoners, waiting out a sentence. Halfway there. Praying she doesn't become the next mass shooter or serial unaliver. I hate my life deeply with her. When I'm with my husband it is happy, but as soon as she comes around, we become deeply depressed. I know she is a victim in all of this, but I can't help these immature feelings of hating her. Hating when she bullies other kids or my mom. Hating when she is mean to animals. Hating how she talks to anyone in a place of authority. Hating the experience as a whole. I'm terrified of what the future holds for her, a person with zero respect for rules or authority. Most days I look forward to passing away because it will be more peaceful than this. My stupid ex-friend sent my end day to my family. I am filing a restraining order. Something pretty horrible happened in the past 2 weeks. A random account popped up sending revenge adult film / leaked end day of me to my current boyfriend. This is a Class 5 felony that can put someone in jail for 6 months to 2 years in my state or pay up to $1,000 in damages. It is sadly not the first time. I expected it to happen again in the future, but this time I was prepared with the resources to find out who it was. I hired a friend from ASU to find personal information on the account, and lo and behold, the email and phone number linked to the account is that of my ex-best friend of 2 years. Multiple accounts have been made sending my end day to my loved ones and blatantly body-shaming me. Now, I know they were all her. I went ahead and texted her that I found out it was her. The account magically got deleted 2 days later. The reason we stopped being friends is a bit convoluted. I was 20 to 21 at the time, and I admit my communication skills were not the best, but that doesn't warrant harassment. I found out she never liked me to begin with. Old friends of ours had messaged me telling me she talked bad about me to them and went as far as sabotaging a romantic interest I had with one of my friends. Found out she told him not to date me because that would ruin their friendship dynamic, all while she had a boyfriend of her own at the time. The real nail in the coffin was Halloween night of 2021. We were planning to go to a Halloween party and she got there before me because I took a nap. I asked her over text to order me an Uber and I'll send her the money immediately through Apple Pay. In turn, she got extremely angry at me. I immediately assumed she just didn't want me there and was talking bad about me again. Then she lied that I had asked her to drive drunk to come pick me up from the party, which wasn't the case at all. I know it's completely stupid and childish and shouldn't have been that big of a deal. But here I am 2 years later threatening a restraining order. My husband almost unalived me last night. My husband is an Iraq War veteran. When he came back and was finally discharged, he suffered from severe night terrors where he'd wake up screaming. Years of therapy and getting a service dog helped him out tremendously, and the night terrors and blackouts became less and less. We started dating towards the end of his treatment with the doctor, so I never really saw him at his worst. When we first slept together, he warned me that it could potentially happen, and the best thing for me to do is to not touch him when it's happening. Well, it did not happen for the first, I'd say, 18 months of us dating, until one night while we were visiting my sister and brother-in-law it happened. I did what he said and backed away from him and waited for him to come back down to earth. It lasted maybe a minute or two, I'm not sure, but watching him suffer like that was heartbreaking to see. Last night I was awoken by him tossing and turning and mumbling military talk. I went over and started to talk to him in a soft voice to try and help him get through it. Then I made the mistake. I touched him to try and wake him up out of it. He shot up. Without realizing, he wrapped his arms around my neck and started squeezing. I was truly terrified. I could not breathe and it felt like my head was gonna explode. I think it lasted maybe 30 seconds before he came around and realized what was going on. I truly thought I was going to pass away because moments before he stopped I was starting to lose consciousness and everything was going white. He immediately apologized and hugged me and helped me catch my breath. He brought me to urgent care this morning to have me looked at. I have burst blood vessels in my eyes and I have a terrible headache. I am wearing a turtleneck to hide the marks, but there is nothing I can do about the eyes. I know he didn't mean it and he has apologized profusely, but I am scared of him now. I spoke to his mother and she told me that he did this once to his father a while ago. I'm afraid to tell people because I don't want them to judge him or get angry with him, but at the same time I want to talk about it because it was truly scary. I've scheduled an appointment with my sister's therapist, which I use from time to time, but I'm still in so much shock. I'm not going to lie, there is a small part of me who is angry at him for doing this.
Took a vacation with my best friend and I've realized she is the dumbest person I've ever met. I'm a guy and have a female best friend. We've been friends for quite a while, never dated, and I have a girlfriend. We are both in college and I don't know how she is even in college after spending a week with her. Like, I literally don't know how she's gotten this far in life, and no clue how she's going to get a career job. To point out some things, she was telling me about how she is starting to get depression and anxiety. I then asked her to look at her screen time and the girl is spending 7.5 hours a day on social media. That's almost as much time as a full-time job, and she doesn't see how that's damaging her mental health. We were getting ready to leave the house and took a bunch of food out of the fridge to put it in a cooler. She said we absolutely cannot take any ice out of the freezer. I looked at her with a confused look on my face and asked why. She said she didn't want to use up all the ice. I then had to explain to her how the freezer makes ice. We had some beers left over in the fridge. I asked her if she wanted to split the beers between us. She had no clue what I meant, so I had to explain to her that she would take half of the beers and I would take the other half. She drove through some mud that was on the road from some contractors in the neighborhood and then parked on the driveway. It rained the next day. Mud from the car got on the driveway. No big deal. She went to hose it off and then asked for my help. She said it wasn't coming off, and I had to tell her that it's not like a pressure washer where it will remove the dirt in a few seconds, and that she just has to hold it there for a while and eventually all the dirt will come off the driveway. I checked the oil in her car since she drove 8 hours to this place and it wasn't reading on the dipstick. I told her she needed to add a bit of oil, but she said she didn't need any because it's not due for an oil change yet. I had to explain to her that older cars will burn oil, and she's at risk of blowing her engine with it being this low on oil. She took a hot baking sheet out of the oven and asked where to put it. I said on the stove. It's meant to withstand very hot things, she said, but it's a gas stove and the stove isn't on. Will it damage it? As we were cleaning up, there was an empty beer box. She asks me, do you want this box? Me, what in the world do I want an empty beer box for? I will still probably be friends with her, but I don't think I will ever be able to go on another trip with her again. I literally lost brain cells from spending a week with her. She is oblivious to every single thing and what I call clinically dumb. She wants to be a police officer, but I do not see that happening. I once had her handle my 9mm handgun, and once it went off she started screaming and waving it in every direction with her finger still on the trigger and fully loaded. The girl needs so much growing up to do. I don't know if she will ever get super far in life, sadly. I'd love to help and I challenge her to think critically, but she refuses to make any lifestyle changes that will benefit her, such as reading, cutting back on screen time, cutting back on going to bars with her sorority friends, going on some walks in the park, etc. She is the most stereotypical dumb sorority blonde you see in movies. I never thought there was anyone that dumb in real life, but she has proven me wrong.
For more stories, head over to my YouTube channel, link in bio.
What was your worst experience at a doctor's office? When I wanted a hysterectomy because my life was literally in danger due to anemia and nonstop bleeding, and was told no, because my husband might want kids. I'm not, nor have I ever been married. I was in my 40s and I didn't want kids in the first place, but after explaining all this, was still told no. Because I might meet a man and he might want to knock me up at over 40, and I did not get a say, apparently. I went to Mexico and they yoinked that thing out for me. I came back and met with a completely different doctor for follow-up, and when he learned I'd had a hysterectomy without my future husband's consent, he told me he wouldn't treat me and to CPP for any future care because they are used to dealing with whores. This was 6 years ago, if you're wondering. 2017. I have no reason to think anything has changed and quite a few reasons to think it's getting worse.
What did your child's school nurse do that made you want to hurt them? Every morning, I would drive my 7-year-old daughter to school, give her a peck on the cheek, tell her I loved her, and she would walk into the building. One morning, after I dropped her off, I went to the local laundry to do my laundry. I had just gotten all of the clothes in the washer when the school nurse called me. Madison has a curling iron burn on her cheek. I was shocked. I had just dropped her off and she was fine. I explained where I was and that I would be there as soon as possible. Then, I hung up and called my husband. He went to school. He said once he got there, they called our daughter to the office. He said she had a slight red mark on her cheek. He told them he had no idea how it came to be because I didn't even own a curling iron. He said the nurse put a spot of ointment on the burn and sent her back to class. He left the school. I arrived at the school approximately 30 minutes later. They called my daughter from class again. When she walked in, there wasn't a single mark anywhere on her face. The nurse was panicking. I swear, it was right there on her cheek. We determined that the mark had disappeared and all was good. I bent over, told Madison I loved her and gave her a peck on the cheek. She turned to return to class and the nurse exclaimed, "There it is. It came back. See, I told you. It was lipstick." I was furious.
People of Reddit who ran into the girl that rejected you in the past, how did it go? I fell hard for this lady in university. She did not feel the same way and I was emotionally damaged for a long time. I really liked her and it crushed me that the feeling wasn't mutual. Fast forward 3 years, I get better, snap out of my depression and realize I was in the wrong for the way I ended things. She really liked me as a friend and genuinely cared for me. I reconnect with her and realize she's an awesome friend. She goes through some traumatic experiences and I'm there to support her, but because of this openness I start falling for her again. I'm ready to tell her that I don't think it's healthy for me to be friends like this and that I'm not angry she doesn't feel the same way. A couple days before I'm about to tell her, she says she's falling in love with me. We both realize we have a messed up history together but nonetheless give it a shot. We've been married for 3 years now.
Today I messed up by saving a topless woman from drowning. So this happened yesterday. My family, wife, kids and in-laws, and I had just returned from a pontoon cruise for the evening. It was later than usual so I sent the wife up on the golf cart with the kids and in-laws to get them some dinner while I covered up the boat. About halfway through covering up the boat, I noticed someone halfway across the cove in the water all on their own and she appeared to maybe be in distress. She wasn't making progress swimming one way or the other and occasionally going underwater. There were people on the opposite shoreline yelling at her but I couldn't tell what they were saying. I yell asking if she needs help and she says yes. I call my wife and tell her to come down on the cart. Someone is in the water and needs help. I'm going in. I might need help getting the person out. I put on a life jacket and grab the throw cushion from the boat. I swim out to the person and pass off the throw cushion. She appears out of breath. First thing she says to me is I'm topless. I respond with I'm okay, but are you okay? I also immediately think to myself, my friends are never going to believe this. What is my wife going to think with a topless woman swimming to shore with me? She then says she's running from her boyfriend who is messed up. She also asks if it's shallow enough to touch yet. It wasn't going to be. I help her to the dock where my wife meets us. She tells my wife I'm sorry but I don't have a shirt on. Again my wife just asks if she's okay and she tells us the boyfriend story again. Sure enough, as she gets out of the water she is topless. But she is carrying a white t-shirt that she quickly throws on. She then immediately begins running to shore. At the same time we notice a pontoon cruising towards our dock yelling at us. At first I think this must be her boyfriend chasing her and we are in the middle of some domestic dispute. They quickly get closer and I realize it's 2 sheriff deputies who flagged a pontoon down to carry them across the lake. As they are jumping onto the dock, we noticed the girl had just jumped into our golf cart and was riding away on it. Apparently she was allegedly involved in a string of burglaries and the boyfriend she was running away from was the cops. I had unknowingly aided her swim across the lake to escape and she used our golf cart as getaway. The cops chased her for a while through the night, tracking her down once more, but she escaped again. We looked all day for the golf cart today with no luck. I notified insurance if the theft around lunch. About an hour ago someone notified us through social media that it was parked behind a house in a neighborhood over. So we recovered the cart and it seems okay. They put more warrants out for the suspect and are still looking for her. I broke my leg during a hike with my friends and they abandoned me in the middle of the woods. I learned I couldn't trust my new friends in the scariest way possible, and I honestly feel lucky to be alive. I recently joined a friend group made up of other people my age that I met on my college campus. I've never been a super social guy, and I really wanted to come out of my shell in college. I'm usually a really awkward guy, and I never understood the advice most people gave about making friends. However, I surprised myself when I saw this group of friends playing a board game I liked on campus, and I walked up to them and introduced myself. One of them ended up inviting me to a board game night that one of them was hosting at their apartment, and since then, I have kept up with the group and spent a couple more board game nights with them. They are nice enough people, though some of the girls in the group seem sort of superficial and addicted to their phones. I didn't think much about their faults. I was blinded by the feeling of being included in a friends group for the first time. I wanted to suggest a new activity for us, so I planned a sunset hike with my friends at a nearby national park. I have always wanted to start hiking, and I thought it would be a fun hobby to explore with my new buds. Yet, when we got to the park, my hiking inexperience started to show. First of all, the trail I had chosen ended up being much longer than I thought, and I realized pretty early on in the hike that my shoes were not suitable for hiking. The mood started to get tense halfway into the hike when we realized the actual length, and some of the group started worrying about getting back to the car before dark. It was already starting to get dark, and it got harder to watch my footing as the light dimmed. My friends were arguing about starting to run when I lost my footing and tripped. My foot ended up catching on a thick vine, and I fell forward, and you could literally hear my leg let out a loud snap. I was in instant pain and I knew I had broken some kind of bone in my leg. Chaos broke out among my friends, and to my horror, they started debating whether to leave me or not. I am the largest person in the friend group and a little on the chubbier side. So they were saying that if they carried me, I would slow them down, and we would all get stuck in the woods. I wanted to cry when they started agreeing that they couldn't carry me out, and I slowly realized they were getting ready to leave me in the middle of the woods alone, with a broken leg. I cried and pleaded with them to please help me, to not leave me, but they just said they would call the cops to come find me when they got out of the woods. I have never experienced fear like that in my life. I just laid there trying not to move my leg, listening to all of the horrifying mysterious animal noises around me in the pitch dark. The park ranger didn't end up finding me till about 6 a.m. the very next day. To this day, the experience of spending the night in the woods alone, injured, was one of the most terrifying things I've ever lived through.
I've been banned from seeing my brother's child because I'm HIV positive. My diagnosis came 3 years ago after I discovered that my husband had been cheating on me. He was my first love, the man I trusted with my life, and he'd been leading a double life. It was in one of those deceitful interludes that he contracted HIV and, unknowingly, passed it along to me. Living with HIV is its own unique struggle, but over the years, I've learned to manage it. My viral load is undetectable, which, for those who don't know, means I can't transmit the virus. Of course, I still take precautions, and I'm open with people about my status. I believe it's better to be upfront, hoping that my honesty would foster understanding and compassion. My brother, someone I'd always held close in my heart, is getting married soon. He and his girlfriend are expecting a baby, a new life I was looking forward to being a part of. I was so excited about the prospect of being an aunt, sharing in the joys and responsibilities that come with a new family member. Imagine my shock when, 4 days ago, I received a registered letter from an attorney. It stated, in cold, emotionless legalese, that if I attempted to see their child or contact them, they would take legal action. I was stunned. Just the day before the letter arrived, my brother and I had lunch together. We laughed, talked about the future, and everything seemed perfectly fine. And now, he's blocked me. Their message couldn't have been clearer, yet it was a blade through my heart. The pain is sharp, visceral, gnawing at me with every passing second. I'd been dreaming of becoming an aunt, of holding that little bundle of joy, of being part of their life. But now, that dream has been cruelly snatched away. What hurt the most was the way they chose to communicate. They hid behind a legal notice instead of talking to me face to face. It felt like a betrayal. I've now returned their wedding gift and cancelled my plane ticket to St. Lucia where the wedding was supposed to take place. I was no longer invited. I was no longer wanted. Adult entertainment, who was the grossest customer you've had? I had this really awful customer once who was really into the 1991 drama film Boys and the Hood. His kink was the scene where Ricky got shot in the alleyway. Me and a handful of escorts met said customer at his Beverly Hills mansion one day and he made us watch the scene on repeat. He handed us all the scripts with the parts included. He gave us this whole seminar about how we were going to recreate the scene and film it for his private collection. It got out of control. He was very adamant about being Ricky, even though he was a middle-aged, overweight white tech millionaire. After a month or so of rehearsing we showed the scene. I played Ricky's mother and I had to do a lot of screaming and crying. He built this big alleyway set in between the guest houses on his lush property and decided to film there. He even got his friend down in Hollywood to provide special effects squibs for the shot, fake blood and all. He was in full blackface, white long sleeve, and tan pants just like Ricky. He ran down that alleyway set and got blasted by one of the escorts. My other colleague dragged him into the living room set, and I did a beat-for-beat recreation of Ricky's mother screaming. He laid there, lifeless on the couch, and then made some improv adjustments to the script. He pulled his fake blood-stained pants down and proceeded to pleasure himself while he made us scream and cry over his death. It was so surreal, and it was pretty crazy to see him on the news a few years later standing next to Bill Gates at some big fancy dinner. I was in need of cash about a decade later and ended up at his mansion again. Looking at his shelf of old VHS tapes, there was one which read Crenshaw on the spine. I'm not sure if it was the recording or not, but I think about it all the time. The second time wasn't as bad. He just made me spot him while he hung himself for 20 seconds at a time while he was dressed as Danny Zuko from Grease. My husband told me this the night before he passed away. He passed away 4 weeks ago at the age of 37 after a long struggle with a chronic heart condition. The night before he passed away he was on lots of medication due to the pain he was feeling but managed to stay awake enough to hold my hand and tell me the most romantic thing I've ever heard him say. He looked at me eyes half open and told me that his heart failed him, but the one thing it did right was fall in love with and choosing me as his soulmate and life partner. This made me tear up. I felt this hard sting in the middle of my head and I did my best to fight my tears off but couldn't. This was literally the most romantic thing I've ever heard him say to me. I felt joy yet sadness, reassurance yet devastation. It was a bittersweet type of feeling that I cannot describe. He passed away at 6 a.m. in the morning. It was so devastating. It hurt, it still does, but not a day that goes by that I don't think of the last thing he said to me and tell myself about how lucky I was to be loved by someone so sweet, so generous and kind-hearted. Rest in peace, Thomas. I'll forever keep you in my heart, mind and eyes and will always love you no matter what. Thank you for bearing with me. I just wanted to tell somebody. I'm leaving my disabled boyfriend who saved my life at the cost of his own. 3 years ago, my boyfriend and I were walking down a wet and busy road on vacation in Thailand, when a car swerved at a violent speed, trying to avoid a stupid biker stopping on his phone in the treacherous weather that it was. My boyfriend, being the quick-thinking man he is, saw my frozen, terrified body in the direct vicinity of the moving car, and he jumped in front of me, pushing me away from the impact at the same time. I was left with some nasty grazes, but other than that I was fine. My boyfriend was left paralyzed from the waist down. He now lives life in his wheelchair. He has been diagnosed with PTSD from the accident and often has flashbacks in which he'll scream and sweat. He is distant and cold. His mental health is, to put it lightly, very bad. He spends most of his time on his PlayStation and we haven't been physically intimate for months. If he's not playing games, he'll be at the pub with his mates. He does coke with them. He says he can't enjoy love making anymore. He says he doesn't enjoy love making, with being the way he is. I've tried to tell him I still think he's gorgeous and no attraction is lost. He doesn't believe me. He has gained about 60 pounds and finds no value in healthy life choices anymore. I feel like I'm living with my best friend who I'm in love with, but like I'm in some sort of friend zone. He says I'm being paranoid. It's him, not me. He tells me he loves me. He has tried therapy. He has made an attempt to not do coke on the weekends. He doesn't want to do it. I have tried to encourage him to do both many times. He says he doesn't resent me. All of my friends talk about how lucky I am and how he loves me so much, but I think that's messed up because they have no idea what it's like to be in a partnership with someone who is paralyzed. My feelings are just as strong for him as they are when I fell in love with him, but I can't do it anymore. I am exhausted. I will forever be known as the woman who left her disabled boyfriend after he saved her life at the cost of his own. The middle school Hitler finds out no one likes her. At my middle school, a vice principal fancied herself a dictator. Any tiny bit of power she got was an issue. But I was a middle schooler at the time and a good kid, not often in trouble, so I didn't cross her path until 8th grade. Her friend was a bus driver named Pat. For 6th and 7th grade years, we had an excellent bus driver. He was pleasant to the kids, let us put the windows down when the Georgia heat got too much, etc. But he retired, and the bus driver we got was a furious middle-aged woman named Pat who did not like children and made it clear every day the windows stayed up, or we went back to the school. She would yell as she had the only fan blowing in her face on a 100+ degree school bus. Ostensibly, this was to keep us from throwing things out of the bus, but that was never an issue before or after. The real reason was that before the bus driver could leave at the end of the day, all the windows had to be backed up and locked. So, this saved her effort. My bus stop was the first she drove by but the last to pick up, and it had been that way for years. That changed this, and she decided she only wanted to stop on the first pass by and kept threatening to leave the kids in my neighborhood if we made her stop twice. I first got on the Karen vice principal's radar because Pat left me on a bustling road one morning. She could have stopped but wagged her finger at me as she drove away and left me. I flipped off the kids, laughing at me out of the back window. But the bus driver, Pat, thought I was flipping her off. I didn't get suspended because she left me with no way to get to school on the side of a bustling road. And my mom threatened to sue if it happened again. But after that, they had it out for me. Pat tried several times to get me on anything. She even coached the kid to say I bullied him. But when the principal brought in the kid, he said he was my friend. It was those other kids and a bunch of other little crap. Anything to get me in trouble. So, the petty revenge comes in here. I was doing my best to make the bus driver's life hell in passive-aggressive ways. She got annoyed at anything, so it was easy. But Karen found it more challenging to do anything, too. After fighting with the bus driver and the assistant principal for most of the year, revenge came as a police fundraiser. They were advertising it on the local TV news and local radio stations. If you put someone up for arrest, the cops would show up and throw someone in handcuffs and put them in jail until they could call a few people and fundraise the bail. The person who set the arrest had to pay $10, but it was worth it. After being annoyed by Pat and Karen all year, my mom put Karen, the assistant principal, up for arrest. The cops showed up and took her to the room where she could call her friends and raise the money for her to go. The idea was that mom would keep her arrested as long as possible. No one would give her the bail money, not even for charity. So she missed most of a day sitting in the police precinct trying to get anyone to put up enough money for her to leave. Eventually, the cops told my mom that they had to let her go because it had gone on too long. She was the only one who didn't raise the bail money that day. Letting her know precisely how much she meant to everyone at the school felt great. I had a friend who heard her complaining about it later that day. She had called the principal, who donated some, but the other teachers gave nothing, and none of her friends would help. She apparently thought one of the teachers put her up for it. It's so minor and so petty it almost doesn't count. But when I left school at the end of the year, Mom asked her, "How was jail?" Before we walked away for the last time. This is the first time I ever heard a ray sound from a human. My fiancé thought I was cheating, so he hired a private investigator to stalk me for a week. I went on a girls' trip and my fiancé had me followed by a private investigator, and now we have to break up. In the lead up to my trip, my fiancé Evan began to act suspiciously towards me and would even check my phone screen if it flashed up. His behavior became cryptic. I would overhear him having quiet phone calls, and he even began to make more trips to my workplace. Every time he did or said something dubious, I confronted him and asked if he was feeling scared or insecure in our relationship, and he said no and gaslighted me into thinking that I was creating this new damning narrative because he would never question my loyalty. That was until I saw a black car appear behind a row of trees by the lake house. Only my close friends and Evan knew where we were, so I immediately knew this had something to do with my fiancé. I marched over to the car, knocked on the window, and a startled woman with long blonde hair looked up at me behind a pair of dark glasses. She refused to get out of the car or roll down the window. Instead she smiled and mouthed, "Sorry, I am lost," before hightailing it up the track and away from the lake house. I thought nothing more of it until I arrived home 2 days later. I walked in to see the same blonde woman sitting with Evan in the kitchen, who then turned to me and gestured to a seat. As I drew closer, I could see an array of photographs sprinkled across the kitchen table. "Who is this?" Evan pointed to one of the pictures. I laughed and said, "That is the pizza delivery guy." To that he replied, "You two look really close." "Yeah," I said. "He was paying me for the pizza. I don't know the guy." Suddenly Evan shot up in a rage. "Your behavior is unacceptable. Dancing with strange men. Spending so many nights out with your friends. I don't feel like I know you anymore." I watched him pace, and to think, I have been bending over backwards to make you happy and then you go and do this. It's disgusting. I had momentarily forgotten about the blonde woman, so I glanced over and asked Evan who she was. He told me that she was a private investigator, and my brain started to whirl. Evan's investigator stood up, clearly realizing the reality, and excused herself, but I didn't let her go. "No, sit down. When did Evan contact you and why?" I was so mortified and hurt. He must have thought I was having an affair or up to some other wicked scheme. She told me that he suspected that I was being unfaithful and paid her $2,000 to watch me for the week. She produced more pictures, phone records and bank records. I have never cheated on Evan, nor would I. He must be having a premarital breakdown. I defended myself while he questioned me about my male work colleagues, how I laughed at one of their jokes last week in the break room, how I winked at the postman, and why I had started coming home so late and exhausted from work. I didn't know what to do, so I asked Evan if we could sit down and talk alone. We were talking until the early hours of the morning, and I must have passed out because when I woke up, he was gone. I walked towards the staircase and heard a loud moan. Worried Evan was upset, I ran upstairs and opened our bedroom door to find Evan and the investigator having intimacy in our bed.